Faites l'appel, s'il vous plaît, monsieur le greffier.
Monsieur le Sénateur Gorst.
Présent.
Monsieur le Sénateur Farnham.
Présent.
Madame la Sénateur Ferguson.
Présente.
Monsieur le Sénateur Lefondre.
Présent.
Madame la Sénateur Valois.
Présente.
Madame la Sénateur Moore.
Présente.
Monsieur le Sénateur Pallett. Monsieur le Sénateur Mezek.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Hélier. Madame le Connétable de Saint-Laurent.
Présente.
Madame le Connétable de Saint-Sauveur.
Présente.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Brélade.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Grouville.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de la Trinité.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Pierre.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Sainte-Marie.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Ouen.
Présent.
Madame le Connétable de Saint-Martin.
Présente.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Jean.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Clément.
Présent.
Madame le Deputy Martin.
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy Southern. Madame le Deputy de Grouville.
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy Lewis.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Tadier. Monsieur le Deputy Higgins.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Masson. Madame le Deputy Pinel.
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy de Saint-Martin. Monsieur le Deputy de Saint-Ouen.
Présent.
Madame le Deputy Doublé. Monsieur le Deputy Labby.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Wickenden.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy de Sainte-Marie.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Truscott.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Young. Monsieur le Deputy Ash.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Morel.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Guida.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy de Saint-Pierre.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy de la Trinité. Monsieur le Deputy de Saint-Jean.
Présent.
Madame le Deputy de Hegera.
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy Ayer.
Présent.
Madame le Deputy Pershard.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Ward.
Présent.
Madame le Deputy Alves.
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy Pamplin.
Présent.
Madame le Deputy Gardner.
Present.
Monsieur le greffier.
I am present. The Dean is present this morning.
Oh, monsieur le doyen.
Merci. Notre aide soit au nom de Dieu qui a fait les cieux et la terre. Amen. Seigneur Dieu, Père éternel et tout-puissant, qui a établi le gouvernement et la puissance de la terre, pour le règlement et pour la conduite du peuple, et qui nous a commandé d'avoir toujours pour but la gloire de ton saint nom. Nous te prions qu'il te plaise de donner à cette assemblée le don de conseil et de prudence, d'unir le cœur et les affections de tous ceux qui la composent, et de la conduire tellement toi-même par ton Saint-Esprit, que toute leur délibération et ton accompagné te donne de bénédiction. Mais aussi obéir au jugement du peuple, qu'il te plut de commettre à leur soin. Car nous t'en prions, au nom et par le mérite de ton Fils bien-aimé Jésus-Christ, notre Seigneur, que nous a enseigné de t'invoquer en disant: Notre Père, qui es aux cieux, ton nom soit sanctifié, ton règne vienne, ta volonté soit faite sur la terre comme au ciel. Donne-nous aujourd'hui notre pain quotidien, et nous pardonne nos offenses, comme nous pardonnons à ceux qui nous ont offensés. Et ne nous ennuie pas en tentation, mais délivre-nous du mal. Car à toi est le règne, la puissance et la gloire, au siècle des siècles. Amen.
Monsieur le Sénateur Pallett.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Southern.
Defo.
Monsieur le Deputy Masson.
Malade.
Vous jurez que Monsieur le Deputy Masson est tellement indisposé qu'il ne peut pas assister aux États sans exposer sa santé. Madame le député Doublé.
Malade.
Vous jurez que Madame la députée Doublé est tellement indisposée qu'elle ne peut pas assister aux États sans exposer sa santé. Monsieur le député de la Trinité.
Excusez. Les États sont constitués. Before we restart the island plan debate, we have a statement by the President of the Jersey branch of the Assemblée parlementaire de la Francophonie to commemorate the Mois de la Francophonie. Monsieur le Président.
Merci, Madame. Bonjour. Good morning, everybody. Madam, can I welcome the guest we've got upstairs, Monsieur Serchilini, qui est venu aujourd'hui. En fait, il est venu hier. Il a pris un petit retard. Vous êtes le bienvenu chez nous à l'Assemblée. You're very welcome here with us today. Les membres des États sont conscients que le mois de mars à Jersey est marqué comme le mois de la francophonie. Une série d'événements ont été organisés tout au long du mois par l'Alliance française en collaboration avec la Maison de la Normandie et de la Manche et l'Office du Guerrier pour promouvoir la langue française. Cela comprend une conférence à laquelle les membres ont été invités sur l'influence du vieux normand sur l'anglais et le français. Le mois coïncide avec le fait que le 20 mars est désigné chaque année comme la journée internationale de la francophonie. C'est l'un des objectifs de l'APF de favoriser l'apprentissage et l'expression du français et la section de Jersey a été heureuse de soutenir l'Alliance dans ses efforts ce mois-ci. Le français fait partie intégrante de l'histoire de Jersey et son identité, mais bien au-delà d'être un vestige du passé, il offre désormais des opportunités. Il y a l'opportunité de communiquer plus facilement et plus directement avec nos plus proches voisins, mais également avec le monde francophone qui va bien au-delà de la France. Il y a l'opportunité de s'ouvrir à des autres cultures, car d'apprendre une langue et d'apprendre un mode de pensée, c'est rencontrer l'autre. Et il y a l'opportunité pour les jeunes guerriers de pouvoir ouvrir aux autres horizons. Il existe de nombreuses façons de le faire dans notre île. Par exemple, après 2 années d'interruption due à la pandémie de Covid-19, la section française de l'Eisteddfod a eu lieu le 9 mars dernier et 177 enfants ont pu montrer tout l'entendu de leur talent et leur joie de parler en français. Cet événement majeur pour la promotion de la francophonie sur l'île montre par sa vitalité, l'engouement qu'il suscite que la langue française a une place bien particulière à Jersey. En outre, il y a Le Rocher, l'unique journal de la langue française publié une fois par trimestre dans les îles anglo-normandes. Ce journal offre également une plateforme aux langues normandes et vernaculaires de l'île, puisque une page de chaque numéro est consacrée à des articles en guerrier, guernesien ou normand. Il montre en cela que, loin d'être en concurrence, les langues s'enrichissent mutuellement. La section de Jersey accueille favorablement ces initiatives et les opportunités qu'elles offrent pour soutenir et encourager non seulement les francophones, mais aussi l'apprentissage des langues en général. On estime que seulement 40% de la population mondiale soit monolingue, 60% de la population étant bilingue ou multilingue. Et les objectifs de l'APF incluent l'accent mis sur le multilinguisme ainsi que la promotion du français. Le monolinguisme n'est pas quelque chose auquel nous devrions aspirer en tant que communauté insulaire. Pourtant, c'est quelque chose que nous risquons de laisser se produire. Il est regrettable que, depuis des décennies, le nombre de francophones dans notre population diminue. Il est également préoccupant que le français, étant en général une langue secondaire à l'école, ne fasse plus partie du programme de base de GCSE. Il paraît essentiel d'accroître l'enseignement du français dès le plus jeune âge par des programmes tels que le French Experience, l'expérience française, mais aussi en profitant pleinement de la chance d'avoir sur notre petite île une institution comme l'Alliance française dont les professeurs tous Français natifs sont spécialisés dans l'enseignement du français en tant qu'une langue étrangère. Quelle opportunité unique pour nos élèves et pour nous d'apprendre une langue au contact des locuteurs natifs. C'est une chance que n'ont pas de très nombreux élèves au Royaume-Uni et nous devrions exploiter au mieux. Par le passé, il était interdit aux élèves de parler leur langue maternelle à l'école à Jersey, sous peine de châtiment corporel. Aujourd'hui, la répression du langue est beaucoup plus subtile. Par exemple, le fait même que je prononce ce discours aujourd'hui en français risque de provoquer une réaction viscérale chez certains auditeurs. Cela est compréhensible, car la langue est intrinsèquement liée à l'identité. On me reprochera peut-être d'avoir osé faire un discours dans une langue que tant de personnes à l'Assemblée et dans l'île ne comprendront pas. Heureusement, j'ai fourni une traduction en anglais. There is a translation in English. J'ai fourni la traduction, ceci malgré le fait que le français soit l'une des langues de travail de notre Assemblée. Et en plus, avant même que l'anglais ne soit autorisé à être parlé pour la première fois ici en 1900. Ce genre de réactions, si elles sont compréhensibles, sont regrettables. Je pense que Jersey doit travailler et doit revivre son amour du français, quelle que soit sa forme. Le mois de la journée de la francophonie sont donc pour nous des occasions opportunes de reconnaître les bienfaits d'apprendre et de parler une autre langue, et en particulier le jersey. Le comité note avec satisfaction qu'une stratégie linguistique doit être lancée le jeudi 5 mai, à l'instar de la stratégie du Jarier, qui est également imminente. En effet, si je peux revenir sur la troisième de nos langues officielles au sein des États, je dirais. J'ai eu le plaisir d'annoncer que la stratégie du Jarier s'en va être lancée au mois d'avril. Toute stratégie nous dit quelle sorte de travail qu'il faut faire pour être sûr que notre précieuse langue jersiaise ait un avenir, par exemple, en trouvant du rang pour le Jarier dans le curriculum de Jerry. Il faut célébrer nos racines françaises et le Jarier nous aide à retenir notre identité normande. En terminant, je voudrais rendre hommage aux organisations de l'île qui œuvrent pour la promotion du français et du Jarier et donc d'un Jarier multilingue. L'Alliance française, sous l'houlette d'Anna, la nouvelle directrice, bien aidée par Chloé, la Maison de la Normandie et de la Manche, le Consul honoraire, le Bureau des îles anglo-normandes à Caen, l'Office du Jarier, les associations paroissiales de jumelage et les professeurs et les assistants de français à l'île. Au nom de la section de Jersey de l'APF, à tous les francophones de l'île, je leur souhaite solidarité et fraternité dans une égale mesure.
Merci mille fois et merci Ben Defay. There now follows 15 minutes of questions to the President of the APF, should anyone wish to ask a question of him in whatever language you choose to utilise. Senator Lafondre has a question.
Dans l'esprit de la fraternité, etc., le Président partage-t-il mes inquiétudes pour nos confrères membres de l'APF, l'Assemblée parlementaire de la francophonie, à savoir par exemple l'Hongrie, la Roumanie, la Pologne et la Moldavie, que j'ai visité pour la plupart dans le cadre de l'APF, et qui sont maintenant terriblement proches de la Première Guerre européenne que nous avons vue en plus de 70 ans, et qui ont tous vu l'occupation et l'oppression dans le passé. If you want a translation, basically, in the spirit of the fraternity and equality that the President referred to at the end, does the President share my concerns for our fellow members of the APF, the Assemblée parlementaire de la francophonie, namely, for example, Hungary, Romania, Poland and Moldova, most of which, by chance, are visited after the APF, and that are now frighteningly close to the first European war we've seen in over 70 years, and all of whom have seen occupation and oppression in the past.
Merci, chef ministre. Je suis d'accord et bien sûr, on partage tous, on écoute tous les infos à chaque jour et on voit que la situation à Ukraine, c'est très très difficile, ça devient de pire en pire et tout ce qu'on peut avoir, c'est l'espoir qu'il va y avoir une solution paisible et en tant que président de la section, moi aussi je transmets de notre part des salutations et ce sont des mots bizarres, mais des meilleurs vœux, tout ce qu'on peut, un sentiment fort et profond pour que cette situation s'améliore. On pense surtout à nos sections qui sont très proches de l'Ukraine, la Pologne, l'Hongrie, par exemple, déjà mentionné. So of course I send our best wishes, and words really do fail at times like these. And we can only hope for a peaceful solution, Ma'am. And I think I certainly, on behalf of the Assembly and the APF, think particularly about the sections of the APF who are very close neighbours to them. And we send our best wishes. It's difficult not to sound trite in these situations, but all we can do, I guess, is hope. And it brings me back to the point that this is why I think languages and good relations with our neighbours are so critical. When we have little disagreements politically, we see that they soon get put into context when we see what's going on the doorstep of Europe. And we know that we have strong relations both with our northern neighbours in the UK and our French neighbours to the south and west, east.
Are there any? Oh, Monsieur le Deputy Ward.
Thank you, Ma'am. I've asked many questions in this assembly, but never as nervous as this one, so let's give it a go. J'ai suivi des cours avec mes collègues, les connétables de Saint-Martin et député Lahegura, au cours des 2 dernières années. I'd like to ask the Deputy Tadia, would he join me in saying how important that opportunity is? And je voudrais remercier notre professeur pour sa patience et sa compétence. Merci Anna et félicitations pour votre mariage.
Thank you, sir. So, of course, I'm happy to share in the approbation, and I fully agree that I congratulated Anna earlier in my speech. She's just taken over as the new director or directrice, I think you can say either. The jury's still out on what the politically correct language is, even in the French lexicon. And she's very ably aided by Chloe, who's also stepped up. And I think they've got a challenge at the Alliance, and I'll be asking a question next week about funding for language assistance, which has been perennially, certainly in mine and Deputy Southern's time in the Assembly, an area where it can be seen as an easy cut. But I hope it's a temporary one due to COVID rather than anything structural. And I think we need to get behind the work of the language assistants, whoever they're provided for, but by the Alliance in particular, because they provide such a unique experience for our children in schools, especially when they can't travel abroad easily, either due to COVID or simply by the fact that exchange programs no longer really exist. So where it was possible for perhaps us to go and spend a week with a family in France, that's no longer the norm in Jersey anymore. So having access to a native French speaker with the proper accent, not like my Jersey cow accent, as you might say, la vache anglaise, it's really important for those pupils at a young age to hear that.
Senator Fondre has another question.
Merci. La prochaine conférence des présidents aura lieu bientôt. Est-ce que le président serait-il prêt à inviter la conférence, soit des présidents, soit de région, à se rendre à nouveau à Jersey, comme il l'a fait pour la dernière fois en 2015? And in English, hopefully, that's the next President's Conference as soon would be taking place in Europe. Would the President be prepared to extend an invitation for either the regional conference, the European Regional Conference, or the President's Conference to visit again, as it lasted in 2015?
Thank you, Chief Minister, for that question. I think it's really important that when people come to Jersey, our French cousins or French-speaking cousins, they're always struck by the hospitality that they receive, whether it's by the States Assembly or by the twinning associations in the various parishes. And of course, that's something which is reciprocated. It seems like it's been too long since we've been able to meet in person with our French or Francophone counterparts. And the value that gives in a soft diplomatic sense, if that's the right phrase, is really important. And I think it makes it easier that when we do need to talk hard politics, if you like, the realpolitik of it, certainly in the Jersey context, it makes it much easier to do that when we keep those relations going. So I think it would be right. We need to talk to the committee about the practicalities of hosting an event, but I think we've done it well in the past. I just recall the first one I went to, I think it was 2009, when the Constable Galichon, Juliette Galichon, she was the president for a while, and under her stewardship, I think there were also great relationships. So I acknowledge all the work that's gone on by previous president and the committee members of past assemblies too.
Senator Moore.
Merci, Madame. Et mes remerciements à Monsieur le Président aussi et bravo le député Ward. Je voulais simplement demander, Madame, combien d'entre nous prennent des cours de français chez l'Alliance chaque semaine?
C'est une question que je n'ai pas les chiffres à portée de main, mais je sais que je vais parler avec Anna tout à l'heure et qu'on va décider, on va voir. Je sais qu'il y a de nombreuses qui prennent des cours parmi nous. Et je ne vais pas les annoncer parce que c'est un peu personnel peut-être en ce moment. Senator Moore asked how many of us do take French lessons with the Alliance, and it's worth just reminding ourselves that they do offer this. It's something which the GREF provides for us. We don't often get a lot of CPD, is that the right word? Continuous Professional Development in the Assembly. And I think that whatever our levels or our aptitudes are, it's really worth taking up the Alliance on that offer, and the GREF in particular on that offer. Whether it's groups or individuals, they can really tailor your French lessons for you, and they can, of course, also do it ad hoc. So if you need to prepare for a particular visit or to welcome somebody or to go abroad for a holiday, or probably more likely for your constituency duties, then they're the ones to talk to in the first instance.
Does anybody else have any questions? No, if there are no further questions, then that draws this. Oh, Deputy Morel, no. That draws this period to an end. I want to thank everybody for that. We now return to the island plan as amended. Does any member wish to speak?
So can I raise the DEFO on Deputy Southern first?
The DEFO. Members agree. The DEFO is raised. Deputy of St Martin.
Thank you, Madam, and I'm happy to kick off. Because, like many, I'm sure, we finished amendments a little bit earlier last night, and it's taken the pressure off and given us time to maybe reflect. Last Monday seems like a long time ago now, and I can't say that I haven't enjoyed the fortnight, because planning is something that I'm passionate about. Why would I not want to get involved in developing how our island moves forward? And surely it's a job for all of us in this Assembly to try to make our island a better place. Looking back, I think I was fairly engaged for the first few days, and while I didn't feel sick to the stomach like the Planning Minister, I certainly had some days towards the end of last week, over the weekend, where I felt pretty down, and I took some reflection, and I was for a couple of days quiet and didn't say anything at all while I thought about the loss of agricultural land and the effects of building more housing in town. As an ex-farmer mum, I know the value of agricultural land for the industry, but I also appreciate the value of the countryside to everyone who lives in Jersey. But ultimately, we know that we have to provide more homes for more families, and it has to be said in that regard that we haven't done enough, and that 375 affordable homes is a long way short of the target we set ourselves back at the beginning of last week. It's also short of the Minister's original target. So to that end, it's disappointing, and I can't win, Ma'am, because whichever way I go, I don't want to build on fields, but I'm sad that we haven't agreed to build on more of them. So I'm in a difficult spot. But at the end of the day, we have to do more to solve this housing crisis, because it is just that. And it's just as well that this is only a draft bridging plan, because it will come back again in 4 years' time, and we will need to do more again at that point. Ma'am, we all know that to make good decisions, you need good information. One thing we must have in 4 years' time is more data, because we have in this debate been short of that knowledge and information. How did we ever start the sitting without two vital pieces of data? The lack of the census results and the absence of the St Helier Education Survey are not just unfortunate mistakes, they're unforgivable omissions. Why did we allow this to happen? I'd like that question answered. And there are other challenges that we mustn't repeat in 4 years' time. That is the way the housing sites were presented and promoted being one. Next time, Ma'am, every site must be published at the same time, and everyone must be treated equally, so there's no last-minute surprises. But let me, in closing, be more positive, Ma'am, and while I'm a little disappointed on an island scale, on a parish level, it's been a good fortnight, and for St Martin, the parish I represent, I look back satisfied by the efforts of the last 2 weeks. We have resisted the expansion of the Coastal National Park into a third of St Martin, an amendment that had very many of my parishioners extremely concerned. They are much happier with a protected area than a park. And St Martin's has done their bit and now have a new site for affordable housing, and most pleasing for myself, another site for retired parishioners. There's a lot more I could say, Ma'am. I could talk about La Collette, Buncefield, mineral extraction, the need of light industry, addressing the issues of height in St Helier, and most importantly maybe derelict and dilapidated glass houses, which we will have to come back to, but I'm sure others will concentrate on those, so I won't go on. So on reflection, Ma'am, and on balance, and I've used that word a lot in the last 2 weeks because planning is always a balance, I'm content with this plan, and I'm happy to vote it through. In closing, could I thank you, Ma'am, and all the team at the GREF, in particular the 3 officers who have given us fantastic advice. They're a credit to planning policy. And finally, can I just say my thanks to the Minister, who has undoubtedly worked way beyond the call of duty in the last fortnight. Thank you, Ma'am.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. And I'm pleased to follow previous speaker because, interestingly enough, in my final speech through this debate, balance is the word that gone a lot. We all had 2 challenging, fascinating, and I feel successful 2 weeks of debate. It's gone up and down, not easy, as Deputy of St Martin mentioned. We went from amendments to amendments, and then amendments to amendments, and I assume many states members, at least myself, I had a list where I feel we make a progress and where I feel we could make more progress. So I will share with members quickly my views, concerns, consideration, which will guide me for the decision on my final vote. So let's start with housing supply. As Deputy of St Martin mentioned, and it's interesting, we had a target now 4,162 homes, but only 375 for affordable. 42 homes for people with disability and 45 with over 55. I think less than 10% of affordable housing, which is question what is affordable, it's not enough. I wish we could done better. On other side, this figure might be a little bit higher because we adopted amendment that only 50% of future housing development will be affordable. So I assume the affordable household will be a bit higher than 375. Another point, our predicted housing need is the best well-intentioned guess. We don't yet have census data. We didn't create credible population policy until it's published. And I have questioned how our housing need target has been calculated, and what I would like to understand from the Minister a bit more details. I understand that formula is complicated. I understand there are several layers, but the question that I was asked is, for example, 80% of the current planning applications are work for existing domestic dwellings, extensions, refurbishment, improvements, additional units. Was this 80% calculated in our need for the houses? People moving from 1 bedrooms to 2 bedrooms, but 1 bedroom become available. Was this considered in our calculation for the houses stock? So if it's not just for, I think it's important for the states members, it's important for the public who is listening to debate to get a bit more clarity how the number was calculated and what minister would suggest as lessons learned to the next environment minister for the next island plan about calculation of our housing needs. First person, I feel we should have been adopted Senator Mon amendment to use the relic glass houses, explaining why we rezone open green fields whilst greenhouses remain unused and derelict for decades. Was a challenging for me, and I think for lots of members. I'm still not clearer how an open field can be less agricultural importance than a derelict greenhouse. On balance, we supported Senator Mott amendment to allow flexibility on unused buildings and introduction of prefabricated houses building technology, which I regard as a progress. About open fields, I'm really concerned about that we are losing an open field in St. Helier. Not happy about it, and field in St. John with population with bats, and I hope the ecological assessment during the planning process will look it through. On balance, we saved 4 other St. Helier fields and several more in other parishes, and where we heard clear no from parishioners and their representatives. We secure a site for school, for country park, for youth club, made our education estate as an integral part of our planning consideration, and voted for more play areas. These are welcome changes for St. Helier, and on behalf of St. Helier residents, I would like to thank for your votes. Now, the work starts. We have to ensure that it's happening and it's implemented, and we'll not debate another country park in another 3 years. It was on the map for the last 11 years. I wish, and this is again to the Minister, if he can indicate in his closing speech what's intention, we had more times as a states member between publish inspector report, 2 amendments, and amendments to consider and consult. I felt this 2 weeks was too little to digest and to, we've done it, but, and I understand why, but would the Minister suggest for the next time that it will be changed? I woke up this morning and had pinched myself that it was not a dream. All my amendments were adopted, all 8, which I'm happy. So now residents of our urban and suburban parishes can access the country parishes' affordable housing development, and we have improved policy for inclusion for people with disabilities. Also, by accepting my amendment, hospital traffic arrangements will be looked at holistically and privacy of residents will be considered. I would like to join Deputy of St. Martin and thank for the Grafton government officers for supporting us, all of us, during this process. It's impossible to make a perfect plan. For me, it's not going far enough. Much more needed to address sustainability, environment impact, and general holistic approach. On the balance, I feel we have created a better plan that we have now. With compromises, it's not easy to compromise because of passion of all members from all sides. And we have created, I think, a plan with balance and common sense. I'm going to listen carefully for the debate and other members' views and also closing speech of the Minister. Thank you.
Conataba of Greville.
Thank you, Mum. I think I was the first to put my light on, and you didn't notice it. And there I was thinking I was your favourite constable. But,
Don't let the secret out there, Conataba.
Thank you, Mum. Yes, I agree with a lot of what Deputy Luce said, but I feel obliged to speak because at the parish assembly that was called for by Raquette, there were 3 items which concerned rezoning, but there was also a 4th item, and I'll read out the resolution. to request the Constable to relay to the States Assembly their concerns with the process adopted for the Bridging Island Plan, and in particular their dissatisfaction with the shortness of time available for parishioners to consider carefully the amendments lodged in relation to Grouville. That was overwhelmingly accepted, Ma'am, and I have to say I agree with the sentiment that the last-minute amendments that were brought forward didn't allow enough time for proper discussion. The timeline was set out early on, and so States members were aware that we waited for the planning inspector for his report, and then the minister's response to that, and so we had a very short window to put those amendments forward. So that was the explanation of why it happened. It seems to me that for an island plan with such important decisions that the lodging period for amendments should be, I would suggest, a minimum of 3 months from the actual day of the debate. And that would have fitted in with the process this time, because it would have just meant the amendments would have been put before the planning inspector did what he had to do. So I think improvements can be made there. There was an overall feeling as well about the process, and Deputy Sir Martin touched on it, about the lack of information and how there are other factors that should be taken into consideration when we're discussing the island plan. And so he mentioned the schools, and we had an amendment from Deputy Gardner about the schools in St Helier, and I wondered if all of the fields in Grouville had been passed. Sadly, none of them have. That was about 200 homes, I think, Ma'am, and how many children of primary school age would there be living in those homes? And I've no idea, but probably 30 or 40, which is about 10% of the intake of the school. So that would have had a knock-on effect within the catchment area. Presumably the catchment area would shrink, and where would all those children go? Care homes, there was an amendment from Senator Pallett about care homes. Not sure we've given enough thought to where our care homes are going to be with an ageing population. Hotels haven't been mentioned, but Visit Jersey are aiming for a million visitors a year. I'm not quite sure where they're going to stay. And other infrastructure, such as drains, are they capable of having further development in various parishes? And we don't know. And of course, the elephant in the room is the population. We passed a policy recently. I didn't actually support it. I didn't really think there was much in it. I'm not sure it had to come to the States, because there was nothing in it that the Council of Ministers shouldn't be doing already. And the only real sort of goal in it was to have a dream of net zero inward migration. But I'd suggest it will remain a dream, because dreams only come true if you actually put some work into it. And you need things like a strong policy, a strategy, roadmap, and targets. And there were none of those of any real merit in that report. So we don't know what our population target is. There are some that think we should have net zero inward migration immediately. I don't think that's feasibly possible because of the economy. But equally, I don't think we should have unrestricted net inward migration, which we sort of have at the moment. The last plan, I believe, was based on an increase in population of people coming here of about 350, and we've averaged 1,000. No wonder we've got a housing crisis. So the next government, I hope, will put some thought as to what our population needs to be. There are obviously considerations with the economy, so if we reduce the amount of inward migration, it's going to have an effect on the economy, and that all needs to be balanced by cleverer people than me. So the Parish Assembly wasn't really supportive of the process. I have to say, like Deputy Luce, the officers have been very supportive of, they came to the Parish Assembly, or one of them did, a senior member of the team, and explained the process, which was very helpful. And all the way through, the Minister, Housing Minister, and the officers leading the programme were proactive in approaching parishes and constables, and reactive when we approached them for any advice and help, and it was always freely given and in a very timely fashion. So I can't really thank them enough, and I'm pleased they're next door. And I don't normally like officers being next door when ministers are bringing mundane propositions to, everyday propositions to the States, but I think it was vital that they were there this last fortnight, and I'm pleased they have been. one thing Deputy Chadier raised, and I think it's an important point, is the uplift in value when land, agricultural land, is rezoned for affordable homes. And I haven't got the resources to find out exactly what that is, but I know with the Dillamar site, at the time, it was probably about £50,000 per house, and there's 7 houses on average per vergee, so £10,000 or less, or the value of £10,000 or less for an agricultural field, all of a sudden, because of the calculation where they start off with the selling price, which is affordable based on median wages of 2 people working together, which I think is about £90,000, and you work out what the mortgage that they can afford, which at the time was, I think, £350,000 for a 3-bedroom house. You can then work back, because you know roughly the cost of building that house, and you end up with this £50,000. That's actually gone up, in my understanding, because now the affordability of a mortgage has changed, because you can get 7 times salary as opposed to 5 times salary. So I suspect that the uplift from a £10,000 field is probably now £500,000, and that to me is too much. I don't agree that we should do like France and just pay agricultural value, because that would mean compulsory purchasing, possibly from people who don't want to sell. But I think there could be a happy median between the 2 figures, and maybe the uplift needs to be 10 times, but not 50 times. The parish assembly was overwhelmingly opposed to any development on greenfield sites in the parish, and that was a bit disappointing. And Deputy Martin pointed out, well, all the people there, it's a fair representation, probably got their own homes, comfortable, affluent, wealthy. I'm not quite sure what term one would like to use. And many of them said to me afterwards, oh yes, we do need some fields, we understand that, just not these fields. And maybe we didn't get involved enough, or I didn't consult enough with the parish, although I wasn't actually involved in the site selection. I should have got them more involved, because I actually think some of these fields were the least worst fields to be putting forward. The average age of the parish assembly, I'm not sure, but it won't be less than 60 and probably approaching 70. And there were no young people that I was trying to find a site for there. There was a couple of youngish people in their mid-30s, I know, but very few young people. And it was very disappointing, actually. And I did all the publicity about the meeting, and there was something in the Evening Post where I said, you know, email me, let me know if you're in the category of the people who are struggling to afford their home. I only got 1 email, and I will finish with and read it out, because I feel I've let this person down. I got a reply to the email, so I'll describe, obviously I'm not going to say who it is, a bit about their background. Jersey born, started a family a little bit late because they were concentrating on their careers so they could afford a child. When they finally had a child, they were living in a 1-bedroom flat, and the lease agreement to ban children. Their landlord was understanding and allowed them time to move. They eventually moved. They're now living in Grouville. They pay £1,600 per calendar month, which is a lot of money. They describe themselves as not needing income support, not eligible for it, and they're not eligible for income support. So it's a sort of middle Jersey, I suppose, and we're sort of letting them down. And she finishes the second email with, I hope there's still in the future, there will be in the future, affordable housing in Grouville. It's quite agree with this next bit. It's such a lovely parish, a real village, but we need to act like a village. And I'll finish with the original email, if I can find it. I was due to attend the meeting last night, but I felt unwell. I was so very disappointed to read in the local news today how the majority of people were against the proposal. I can't understand these people. Where is their compassion or empathy for others who need affordable homes? Surely there can be a compromise. Why do we teach our children to share with others, to care for others, to help the people in need, when as adults we do not act as good role models? I would like to understand more about the issues and what happens next. I will leave it there, Mum.
Constable of St John.
Thank you, Mom. We've covered a lot of ground in the last 10 days of debates. Yesterday we were talking about air pollution, and it's clear that air monitoring is an area that needs urgent attention, perhaps not an island plan issue, but certainly an Environment Department issue. I think, like others, I've learnt a lot about our island. We all think we know a lot about the island, but we're still learning. In particular, I learnt about the Grouville wetlands, and I believe that these are important and consideration should be given to adding added protection to this special area. We heard a lot about balance. I'd remind members it was actually the Environment Minister who brought a proposal for a field not supported by the JFU and that has a rare bat colony residing there. I changed my mind more than once during the debate. The Marine National Park is something I would like to see, but I listened to the counter-arguments about the current position with our neighbours. Glasshouses is another area I wanted to support, but on reflection I felt the wording of the proposition wasn't tight enough, albeit the proposal was well intended. Ma'am, I voted against Field S530 due to the environmental note we received from the Assistant Minister for the Environment for that site. We heard an apology yesterday from the Constable, so I would appreciate the Assistant Minister's comments on the document he shared about the environmental issues, in particular the source, and if he circulated it as the Assistant Minister or as someone connected to the authors. I don't know about others, but it certainly swayed my views on that particular field. It was interesting hearing the Minister saying that he was doing his job. Well, I would remind him we've all been doing our jobs, be that representing a district, a parish, or the island. I would offer my thanks and congratulations to the Minister for the sheer volume of work he's got through in the last 10 days and in the build-up to the debate. Not an enviable task, but I think a task that he's carried out very well. As mentioned by others, the officers from planning have also been excellent in their support to members, and whilst I haven't always agreed with them, I think they're also to be congratulated on doing a very good job in unusual and difficult circumstances. I would also like to thank the staff of the GREF for their help and assistance. The Island Plan debate is so significant. There is so much work that is done, but it still seems rushed. I remember submitting amendments in July, and we only debated it yesterday, along with amendments lodged at the end of February. We'll be told that the consultation has been exemplary. Let's not forget the impacts of COVID in terms of holding large gatherings. Ma'am, I have all the paperwork in my office. I don't know how environmentally friendly that is. I believe there have been around 3,000 pages written, and Ma'am, I can confirm that I haven't been able to read it all. At times it's been like drinking through a fire hydrant. One observation I would make is that the reserve fields submitted by the Minister may have gone through the inspector's review, may have been on the website, but I don't think there was sufficient publicity given to these fields. Whilst the emphasis of the last 2 weeks has been on rezoning green fields, we really have skated over possibly the most important aspect, and that is Overdale. I won't comment on the merits or demerits of the plan in regards to this, only to say that it's clear to me, and I'm sure others, that it's been written with one purpose in mind. The Deputy of St Martin was right in my view, and I can say that now that he supported J371, and that it's right about the need for compromise. It's something we all have to and have had to do. Ma'am, J1109 at Zion is not ideal in my opinion. However, in compromising, I put down a marker that we will want to create a new heart in Zion, and we will want that open space that is promised in this plan to materialise and for the community to have input into its design. Ma'am, I'm pleased to hear the Minister's enthusiasm for community planning. Throughout the debate, it's been clear that we've all taken different approaches to this. Whoever takes on the Environment Minister's role could give advice for the next plan, and I'm sure it's something the Committee de Connotab will be discussing to see if there are templates available in other jurisdictions to ensure good engagement with the public. One thing's for sure, Ma'am, everybody has done their best. Should parishes pay for professional advice ahead of the next plan? I'm aware that some have and others haven't. At the inquiry, it felt quite deflating to turn up as a keen amateur, only to see the planning professionals, some with 3 members from the same practice, and literally boxes of information. Mom, whilst I didn't manage to read all 3,000 words, I can assure you the professionals would have. I'd also like to recognise the work of all the interest groups and thank them for bringing information to our attention. I'd particularly like to thank the Jersey Farmers Union, the JFU, for their work in advising members on their view of each field. I'm sure I'm not the only member who's found that very helpful as we've gone through the debate. Lessons learned. We can always improve things, and as my colleague to my right said, he's just given us some ideas on how he thinks things could be improved. I'd hope that members and other key stakeholders may be invited to reflect on lessons learned from this process in order to help improve the process for the next Island Plan. Finally, Ma'am, I'd like to thank members for their support of the 3 amendments that I put forward for St John. I appreciate that the hard work starts now to ensure we deliver that, but we have a good start. Thank you.
Deputy Pershard.
Thank you, Ma'am. Just wanted to pick up on a couple of comments raised by the Deputy Sir Martin Conitar of Groovale, both of whom are absolutely right about the lack of data that we currently collect and currently have, particularly when it comes to population, but also structural needs. I thought the Conitar was absolutely spot on when he said that, you know, we have still based projections on 375 inward net migration, but averaging over 1,000, and no wonder we have a housing crisis. And he's absolutely right. That is a matter of basic maths. If the number of people leaving is significantly less than the number of people coming in, there will be an ever-increasing demand on all of our resources. And I know this has been said before, and I'm sure will be said again and again, but we really need to get a grip on our attitude to population growth. I think we have moved a bit in the last 4 years. I remember having conversations with certain members of this Assembly in 2018. I was in my kind of bright-eyed and bushy-tailed stage of being a States member. I was trying to convince members that we need to stabilise population and that we could stabilise population whilst also supporting the economic activity of the island and even improving it. And I remember certain members being completely and utterly against that concept. And those same members now, I've had the same conversations 4 years down the line, and actually there's been movement there. We might not completely agree on what stabilisation looks like or how quickly we should get there, but I think we now agree that there should be stabilisation. So I'm really optimistic about the future in terms of our attitude to population growth. But I just want to mention it, that when it comes to the Bridging Island Plan and any future island plan, until that consistency and firm position has been established, there will always be this issue in these island plan debates around resources, housing needs, and the future. And it's an unfortunate position for the minister to be in, but can't be held to account for all of the missing data or the lack of firm policy position on this. And just reflecting on the policy position that we have taken this term, particularly on population, the Assembly did make demands when they supported P120, which was the proposition I brought about the data collection, migration and population data, it was called. And in Part B, this Assembly asked for the following things: the new number of primary and secondary schools, the hospital facilities, staff accommodation, affordable homes for first-time buyers and for elderly residents, and social housing requirement, and some other things, road maintenance and provision of utilities. That was supported by a huge majority. The demand for that data was supported by a huge majority of the Assembly, and that was in 2020. And if it had been delivered in the common population policy that we recently debated, if those things had been delivered, we'd be having a slightly different discussion today, and the Bridging Island Plan would have, I'm sure we would have still had very many amendments, and rightly so, but I think the conversations would have been very different. And the reason I highlight this is because I think the next assembly, members of the next assembly, should really consider their position on adopting policies that don't fulfil criteria that they previously set. And it's a position to be in when we were presented with a common population policy that didn't deliver the items listed in P120. There's a lot of empathy and sympathy. We can see that by the majority support. And of course, I understand why most members decided to support that policy, because it was clear that it was the best we could do and that the mechanisms for the data collection weren't yet in place. However, I think in terms of sending a message and being clear about our own position as an assembly on what we want for population policy, I think it's really important that, for me, it made more sense for that to be rejected. Not because there was nothing that was good in it, that is far from the truth, but because I think it's really important that this assembly is firstly consistent. So if there's a proposition that asks for population data and then that's not delivered, we have done it, so no, let's reject that. But also, because now going forward, we've had so many comments in this 2-week debate around the need for a population position and for data. So for me, it's important to hold that stance in any relevant debate. And if you have a position on a particular thing, population policy being the example in this case, and it relates to a huge number of other policy, that position needs to be maintained in every vote that we have that's relevant to that thing, because then otherwise we find ourselves in positions like we are with the Bridging Island Plan, where people are criticising the government for not bringing forward data, but a few months ago wholeheartedly supported a policy that didn't contain the data they asked for. And this isn't about blame or critique. We're all doing our best all the time. But it's just it's an observation about consistency of position and about seeing the relationship between a series of propositions, whether they're backbenchers, whether they're members of government as private members, or whether they're government propositions, or whether they're the Bridging Island Plan. I think being able to connect the dots across all of those things is a really important skill, and one that I hope that the Assembly will continue to develop over time, because as I alluded to, if that data had been brought forward, we would have had a very different debate in the last 2 weeks, and that they're completely interlinked. So that's an observation I've made throughout this process. Excuse me. Excuse me. I think the other, this is a very brief point regarding the use of sites specifically for affordable homes for first-time buyers and for elderly residents. I think that we need to move towards, and I know that the Housing Minister actually has this view, so I'm very excited to see what comes out of that portfolio going forwards. But the idea of multi-generational areas is really, really important. There's a lot of evidence to suggest that multi-generational developments actually improve well-being for the more vulnerable residents, and they're more sustainable in a sense. They combat loneliness, they nurture community care, and it's very good for children to see their parents interact with an older generation and perhaps neighbours who need care and help. And I just wanted to highlight that in response to the Deputy of St Martin talking about the amendment that he won, I think, yesterday, which is obviously fantastic. But it's the island plan. I think a piecemeal approach is always tricky, but you need to consider these wider initiatives on a holistic, wholesale kind of perspective. So that was just an example of that. I think what's really interesting about being a member of scrutiny and then being a member of government, and particularly as an assistant minister, the planning minister, is that you get to see both sides of the process. And Firstly, I'd like to say that all the way through, feedback on the process has been really welcome, and I know that officers have been listening to members. And I remember having a conversation with the minister several months ago about making a slight change to the process in response to demands of members, backbenchers, and we made that change. So I hope members do feel that I accept that they have critique of the process, and we welcome the feedback of that. But on that, but equally, I do hope that members have seen that throughout this particular process, we have strived to respond to feedback in a more immediate way and have made improvements along the way. I think a final observation before I briefly talk about the minister's work is the final observation I'd like to make is that there is a tension between, there's a strong tension between an objective adherence to a set of principles of best practice when it comes to an island plan, and there's a tension between that and the emotional or passionate views regarding certain fields or zones or land lanes and other things. And actually, I think, of course, the debate of members' amendments to the island plan is itself the manifestation of that tension. And it's absolutely right that members are able to exercise their democratic right to bring forward amendments regarding areas that they're passionate about. And I think that tension is played out in this debate format. And it's very, very welcome. And I think that there probably is an understanding, but I certainly have gained a greater understanding being an assistant minister for the Environment and Planning Minister, in that that dual need to adhere to kind of objectively adhere to best practice and provide an island-wide plan, i.e. a holistic view of the island, and to present a plan that is aligned with the best practice planning standards that we've chosen to follow. And alongside that, that should, in my view, now that I've gone through this process on this side of the fence, it has to be balanced and allowed to be challenged by the subjective and passionate views of local parish representatives. I think that's a really healthy process, albeit tense and difficult at times. But I hope members see that tension exists, and that is the rationale for some of our positions, some of the positions that my minister has taken, and some of the positions I've ended up taking in this debate, which I perhaps wouldn't have taken as a backbencher, but having that inside track and that best practice lens, it's been an interesting shift, which is just an observation I thought was worthy of sharing. The amount of work and the development of this has obviously been almighty, and both officers and the minister have put a huge amount of effort and work into this process. And I do think that the Assembly, I'm sure, would like to show their appreciation and approbation for the minister who sitting through this 2-week debate alone. And can you imagine if you'd lodged a proposition and then it lasted 2 weeks and you had to deal with 60-odd amendments? I think it's an almighty feat. So I do just want to offer my congratulations and thanks to the minister for that. And I will leave it there. Thank you, Ma'am.
Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Ma'am. Apologies. It starts off by echoing some of the comments that have been made regards the work of the officers, and we may not have agreed everything that's come forward in the plan, but we absolutely do agree that the work being put in by officers next door who've stayed and done the hours in this assembly, like many of us have, and been around to talk to and approach with questions and clarifications, are really important, and it's really innate. I think it's assisted this debate, as opposed to at times we've had officers in the building we've had real issues with, but perhaps as a model of the way to work with civil service. So I'd like to thank them for that. Ma'am, I always try to think about positives and negatives with this such a wide-ranging debate. I think I'm going to finish with the positive so we end on a positive note. It's always a nice thing to do. But I do need to mention some of the things, the concerns I've had, first of all, over this plan and the debate. I think it was the Constable of St John, Ma'am, who mentioned the process as a word, and I think that word is so important, process. And there is something ideological in me that says if a process is so good, then we wouldn't really need that many amendments, and we wouldn't need to be bringing things forward. And I think we all need to think about that, because none of it, well, some may be, but I'm certainly not a town planner or a planner who've got those experience. My role is to represent constituents and represent this island as best I feel possible and stick to the principles that I put out when I was elected, and that's why I hope we've done. Mum, I was really concerned, and I think we've missed an opportunity with the marine park and the protection of a specific area. And I do say, Mum, that I think we will regret that in coming years. And I think we need to go away and think carefully about that and the way in which we can bring that forward. I think that debate became confused with the current situation with fishing and relations, and perhaps is a victim of Brexit like so much else has been. But I think we need to go look at that. And that's about future-proofing. This island plan is a bridging island plan, so we've got time in 3 years to come up with something else. And I do say that I think we will be able to offer something better in government. And that future-proofing didn't happen in some real key areas. We took a very consistent line, and we've taken the criticism in its truest sense, I hope, as well as the petty criticism, which we can ignore, over having a stand saying, you can build on as many green fields as you want, you can build on all of the green fields. But if those homes are not affordable, I'll just pick on one of my positives and sort of insert it here. I'm really pleased to hear that we're using the language of homes, because language is so important. I know units and property has been used, but I think if you go back through the Hansard, and I'm certainly not going to do that, I think the majority of the time the word home has been used, and that is a very different dynamic, and I'm very pleased to see that happening. But anyway, the future-proofing of those homes. You can build on every single green field, and if we don't get right affordable homes on state-owned land, we are going to be back here in 3 years just looking at more green fields and less space for the population to live in. And there was an opportunity missed, and I'm disappointed that amendment was brought to Senator Mezek's amendment about affordable homes being built on state-owned land. We should not be working as a property developer if the only way that we can raise money to improve the realm in which people live as a government is to sell off the gold and the silver and the crown jewels of this island, then we've fundamentally got our economics wrong. So that's one issue I think that I must raise. The other omission, I think, is around the passive house standards. That is future-proofing. That's looking ahead. It's one of many things we need to do. I'm slightly reassured by the changes in bylaws that will come forward, but there seem to be lots of gaps in what we're doing here. And future-proofing the building of homes is so important in terms of their energy consumption, their energy use, and the long-term impact they have on our planet. And that's something that, again, we will regret if we don't get right now. I mentioned a couple of times that I think this is, and the Minister will probably be really cross with me over this, but that's okay. I know the Minister can get cross and we can still say, have a chat at the end, so that's okay. But I still see this as, to some extent, a developer's charter. And the reason I say that is because there are spaces, and it's this phrase I mentioned yesterday that is, if I'm honest, it's eating away at me, this planning contribution. So you can, and as a representative of St Helier, I know that if you simply say to developers, you can develop and you can build, and if you can't find a space for a play space or a green space, that's okay. Make a contribution, we'll find it somewhere else. Because that is not realistic. And then that space is gone and we'll never see it again. And that's one of the problems I have with the focus on just large parks. I'll talk about Millennium Park in a moment. Millennium Park and country parks, just build 2 big parks. And that's sort of free rein for this planning contribution to go into full force and and planners to say, look, hey, we can build this, that's okay, because we'll make a contribution towards the park. Don't worry about that. We'll put some new swings in. That'll be lovely. We'll make sure the swings are always in good condition. So let us build. I'm afraid modern cities, modern towns, future-proofed, building those green space as we go. And if that means that those homes are, you miss a couple out or you have to build them differently, then so be it, you have to do it. Leadership's about difficult decisions. I stood in this assembly and I thankfully got agreement to say that we're not simply going to extend the park all the way through because there is another desperate need in St Helier for schools. And I'm quite happy to stand here and say, take some of that green space that could be green space and build a school for our children and their future so they have a green space to be educated in. I'm quite happy to take it on the chin over that. Actually, the response I'm getting with people is when they're listening to the argument, they're understanding where we're coming from and saying, actually, we've got a very good point here. We need to do this. And then we need to look at replacing green spaces around town as we build and not just making it a planning contribution somewhere else. So I'm very concerned about that. It's something that keeps coming back into my mind when I talk about it. I want to congratulate Deputy Gardner on a proposition on play space. And this morning, one of those things happened to all of us is you bring a proposition forward and you get it agreed, and then the radio clips somebody else's speech. And this morning, Deputy Gardner was a victim of that because they clipped me. And I have to be fair in my approach and say, yes, I did approve it, and they clipped me, and it was a lovely little bit of PR, but well done, Deputy Gardner, for thinking about play space, because that's really important. That's really important. But it's about implementation of that. It's about, if we are going to say it has to be within 5 minutes walk or 500 metres, unless you can't do it, I still, again, that's your planning contribution coming back again, unless you can't do it. Well, as a developer, I'm afraid we can't do it. Oh, that's okay, then we'll do it somewhere else. We mustn't do that. And we have to have our priorities right. I do share as well the concerns over the lack of knowledge. We haven't got the census data. We do not know how many empty homes there are. And I will stand here again and say, we are not going to vote for greenfield after greenfield after greenfield. We don't know how many empty homes there are out there, and we will not using all of the land that we own for affordable homes. That is a principle that we need to all seriously think about, because it doesn't work. In the long term, it will fail. So we have to look at that. And the future risks to the islands. One of the future risks is the coming election. Some groups, whatever they want to call themselves, seem to be talking about us having a town and a capital that is hugely densely populated. And we've got to be so careful about that. And when we discuss population, we have to do so and take the really difficult decisions on population and the reality of this being a small island. And that's not easy for any of us, but we have to do it. But that's in the weeks to come. So the positives, the protection of spaces in St Helier, desperately needed for schools and the youth facility. And perhaps in my time, who knows, I may see it happen. What a marvellous day that will be. What a marvellous experience that will be to see some sort of facility actually built. There are some small steps to affordable housing, some small steps, minimum of 15%. Can I say to the Minister, please put the word minimum in bold and in capitals in whatever it is you do. Underline it, put it in italics, I don't know what you do, but just emphasise it, please. The protection of those green fields in many cases. We have decided, difficult sometimes, and we're having questions all the time now, to not build on green fields, even though some of the arguments seem so simple and obvious, but they're not when you look at them in the wider picture. And that use of the term homes is so important, because unless we have homes where people can live, afford, heat, cool down in the summer, have space for their children to play, have space to sit outside and meet your neighbours and build communities again. And that is the beautiful thing about Jersey. There are communities. And Mum, I'll finish off by saying that the road I live in, I've seen change over the last few years, because we've been there quite a few years now. And generations have moved on, and now there's lots of young children running about and playing. It's just wonderful, because you see the next generation coming through. But they face traffic and they face pollution that we don't monitor, and they have schools that are well equipped enough. And while I'm in this assembly, I will continue to have a voice for those people who need those facilities. Because if we don't build for that generation coming into the future, then we don't build for our generation. And I won't make myself unpopular by saying to some people in the assembly, and your generation, but I'll have to face up to the fact I'll qualify for over 55 homes soon, so that we all have to face up to those things. Ma'am, I'd like to say thank you to the Minister. He's worked his socks off sat there with his big screen and his computers and his vast amount of paperwork, and he's been in this assembly throughout this time to talk this through, and I think that's a very important thing. We may not have agreed on everything, and we may have given them a hard time at times, but you know what, that's partly our job as well, ma'am, so I'm sure we can do that, because you've got to have these debates. This may not be the best way to do this, because we're all suddenly having debates that are a little odd, but ma'am, we'll come to an end point, and on the balance, I think we still have far to go, and it is a bridging plan. I think we could do better in the future, and it's the principles behind what we're doing and the themes underneath it and where we want to see our island going that's important in the long term. So thank you, ma'am, and I'll leave it there.
Does any other member want to speak on the island plan? Deputy Guida.
Thank you, ma'am. I'll try first to quickly answer the question of the Constable of St. John. All the members received an email from me mentioning, and characteristically, nature and ecology. It was difficult for me to write this, but I think it was very, very important. Many members might know that I'm actually bona fide environmentalist. I've spent the last 15 years before becoming a politician working as a professional wildlife photographer. And I have very, very deep links with all the professional ecologists in the island. I spent 10 years working very, very hard with Doral. I even actually flew some of their animals around. So it's actually something that I'm very deeply involved, or at least was very, very deeply involved with. And it's something that I've had to somewhat let go with my new position, even though one of my positions in the States is Assistant Minister for the Environment. We found ourselves in the middle of a number of crises, one of them being actually writing an island plan. But of course, you all remember COVID and Brexit. But it's funny that we've almost forgotten OneGov. We spent the first 3 years of this government with the civil service in turmoil, everybody losing their job, having to reapply, being moved around, not knowing what they would do next. Those were quite a few difficult years. And if we wanted to achieve anything, we did have to compromise. We did have to select what we wanted to do. Our planning system is not very good for the natural environment. And I'd like to make the difference because it's not something that is very well understood in Jersey. The natural environment is for nature. It's not for humans. When you look at it, you don't think of, oh, we want the natural environment to suit us and we're going to design it to suit us. Nature comes first. It has to be balanced, it has to be biodiverse, it has to work by itself before we can enjoy it. And it's not something that we do very much in Jersey. And I do hope, and I'll mention this a little bit later on, I do hope that it is something that we will work on in the next island plan, and certainly when we revisit the planning law, which definitely needs a lot of work, and we might move a few things around to make sure that the natural environment is something that we take better care of. But I'll come back to that. Of course, the next step, and I'm sure that the Minister will spend some time on this, is to thank the officers who have worked on this. I'll go a little bit deeper on it very, very soon. But again, think of the business as usual that they've had to do while doing this. The fact that they had to deal with Brexit, which meant that almost all the laws to do with natural resources had to be changed, food laws, invasive species, everything had to be changed. So massive amount of work there. They were involved with COVID. Many of our planners worked with tracing and testing and everything. It was at the same time as we had a massive number of new planning applications and complaints. The lockdown actually started a fashion for complaining about your neighbors, which multiplied, and of course we had to take care of all this. So all this at the same time as they worked on the island plan, and we'll get to that very soon. I'd like to thank the GRAPH, sorry. I'd like to thank the GRAPH because this was unbelievable. I mean, 107 amendments on a very complex piece of work, and they managed to make it work. I think the fact that we managed to do it in 2 weeks, and the fact that it was in the right order, that things happened, when they should have, is extraordinary. I wouldn't have been able to do it. We looked at it, and it was unimaginable to see all these things and say, okay, if this one is decided first, then that one falls, so maybe we should move them there, but this one would then affect that one. It worked out. It worked out. They did it, and it worked out. And every morning we came to a list of what would come next and what we would have to argue next and debate. And this was really extraordinary. And I think the Minister and I are massively grateful to GRAPH for that. I would like to thank the members. I think this debate was very good. I think I've mentioned it a couple of times, and sometimes it's difficult to accept, but there is a wisdom to the Assembly, and I think we've used that wisdom in those 2 weeks. The compromises were made, and we've reached something that is workable, and that's quite extraordinary. Again, I very often lose faith on this particular aspect, but these 2 weeks showed me that it can exist, that it is indeed in this Assembly. And I'd like to thank the Minister. I think there's something that we forget. I mentioned it once during the debate. This is a summary. This is a very, very short, abridged summary of what the island plan actually is. The island plan starts with an evidence base. The Jersey Integrated Landscape and Seascape Character Assessment. The Jersey Coastal National Park Boundary Review. The Historic Environment Review. The Employment Land Study. The Objective Assessment of Housing Needs. The Saint-Hélier Urban Character Appraisal. The Public Realm and Movement Strategy. 3 stages of that. The Jersey Landscape Sensitivity Assessment. The Saint-Hélier Open Space Survey, and then audit. The St. Brellard's Character Appraisal. The Infrastructure Capacity Study for minerals, for waste, and for water. The Strategic Flood Risk Assessment. Have we forgotten that one? Assessments of sites. All those sites that were proposed or were needed for anything were assessed. Housing, protected and natural spaces, employment land, community facilities. And all this then went through a sustainability appraisal. Of course, we had an in-committee debate, which was also reviewed and assessed. And then a massive amount of consultation. And there again, I mean, it's something easy to forget, but those officers were out in the parishes, they were on teams, they were in the town hall, receiving hundreds and hundreds of people, reading hundreds and hundreds of letters to bring all this consultation together. And finally, a public inquiry, which is a massive amount of work, which we then have to review. There's only one person in this building who's read all of these and actually knows them intimately. That's the one person that managed to read those thousands and thousands of pages of document so that he would be ready to answer all of your questions in the last 2 weeks. I think we need to pay homage to that. That's quite important. Finally, there's what's missing. So in the middle of all this turmoil, we knew that it would be impossible to make a complete island plan that would work for the next 10 years. We also knew that we would miss some data that would be quite important. And, well, there was going to be an economic crisis. We still don't know which direction it's going. It's getting even worse, of course, with the recent development. So it was very, very difficult to say, well, we're going to give Jersey a direction for the next 10 years. So we decided to make it shorter. What I would like to see for the next plan is, as much as possible, not to revisit the things that we've done properly. We've done a lot of stuff really well this time, and I don't think we need to revisit it, but there are things that are really important. Of course, the number one is the census. We need to integrate our population data with this really properly. The school plan, members will know very well why I'm upset about this not being on time, but it's a very difficult piece of work, and unfortunately we won't have it. I'd love to see something done with glass houses. I don't think that just building homes on them is the solution, but it's something that we should be able to work with. We need to work on the parks. I've said quite vehemently that the island plan is not the right place to put them, but we need them. It's something that we definitely need. We need a real existing statutory coastal national park, and we need a real existing statutory marine park. So it is definitely something that we will do, or that the next assembly will have to do. And of course, as much as possible, I would like the environment, the real environment, nature, to be integrated in that plan much, much better, to be integrated in the planning law much, much better next time. Thank you, ma'am.
Senator Le Fondre.
Thank you, ma'am. I'm delighted to come after the last speakers, ma'am, because it's saved me an awful lot of things I needed to say. I just also want to start off by thanking the Minister and his team and the team of the GRAF in terms of the resilience that everybody has displayed in terms of guiding the Assembly well, through the whole process, but particularly in the last 2 weeks. And I have to say, for the Minister, I think that's been an extraordinary example of stamina and knowledge, a demonstration of knowledge and his experience given his former lives, to use in the past a well-quoted phrase. My takeaway, actually, the Deputy Guida has covered a whole range of things, but ultimately, this, where we know, as I said, we have challenges around housing, this does represent an increase in housing, which we know is incredibly important. I think the other takeaway, Mum, is that for me, the Assembly has sent a very clear message about its reluctance in general, not entirely, but to build on greenfield sites. And for me, I think that will need to be taken on board in future plans. And I'll say 2 further things. Hopefully not too controversial, but and they're all probably about looking ahead. As I said previously in one of the debates, I think it was last week, in my view, we've got 2 choices in terms of development in the housing. We either go out or we go up. And to me, the latter is by far the most preferable, particularly if we want to preserve the green areas, the environment, the ecology, and also what is a significant part of what makes Jersey a fantastic place to live, despite the challenges that we know to exist. And that has been supported in this plan. Obviously, it needs good-sized units, homes. It needs good quality amenity space and good construction and design. And I agree absolutely with the comments in relation to data. I see Deputy St. Peter will be speaking shortly after me. I hope he will pick up on that a lot. But I just will repeat my comments I've made a couple of times during the last few weeks, that we rightly as an Assembly and as a government recognise the absolute independence of the Chief Statistician and of Statistics Jersey. And therefore, as I've said on a number of occasions, no matter how much one would like it, the time of release of data is not under the control of ministers. And yes, we are all very, very interested in understanding the census data, and we will all want to see it. But the release of that data and the timing of the release, or any data that comes out from statistics, is not under our control. Looking ahead, the education plan obviously will be reported. It's my intention it should be out before the elections, but just looking at this state for the future and picking out one area which does figure in the very late years of the present government plan, and I'll pick on Highlands, for example. That is going to require significant investment in the future, and in my view, part of the assessment that does need to take place need to explore whether different locations are appropriate, the ability to regenerate St Helier, reduce traffic, and provide future housing. That all has to be a consideration when we're looking at that site and some of the other education sites that are being considered. And a further challenge for the future, Mum, will be what is often referred to as La Colette 2, which again has been considered in this plan. But if we actually look 20, 30 years ahead from now, in size, it's probably 2/3 the size of central St Helier. It will require very significant and very careful planning, including the fact that obviously the industrial nature of the site does presently perform a hugely important function and will need to be retained. But equally, could it be a significant extension to the residential areas of town, if you like, Jersey's second city? But what that is looking way forward, and is obviously fairly obviously will have quite a few challenges. But despite the various differences we have, we must remember we do represent a fantastic island and a fantastic place. And these 2 weeks, although they have been difficult, have resulted in, I think, what can be described as a workable plan, but as Deputy Guida has covered off a lot of that. I think it's worth making the point because it is the whole point of the Bridging Island Plan is part of setting a framework for the future of the island. Obviously, the nature of this particular bridging one is in the shorter period of time. We have emerged from the pandemic in a good place relative to many other jurisdictions. COVID is still with us. Obviously, we also have the catastrophic war started by Russia in Ukraine. So this island therefore has a number of challenges ahead, and both short, medium and long term, but it has some significant opportunities as well. And I think we are well placed to exploit those, particularly as part of our experience and as we've demonstrated in the pandemic about how we can move swiftly and in an innovative manner when we put our minds to it. And that is absolutely relevant to how we deal with some of the challenges in this Bridging Island Plan. And so what I would just like to finish by saying, again, reiterating my thanks very much to the Minister, to his team, to the team of the GREF, and actually to members of the Assembly for how we've come through the last couple of weeks. But I do believe we have the opportunity and the ability to tackle the challenges I've referred to, and that by tapping into the entrepreneurial and island spirit that really engenders the island of Jersey, which we are, I feel we are all privileged to represent. And on that note, I thank you, Mum, and your team for all the efforts that have taken place.
Thank you, Senator. Deputy of St Peter.
And thank you, Mum. I regret that I've spent the vast majority of this debate in COVID isolation. Others might not. But when it would have been my preference to be in the cut and thrust of the chamber. 2 of the days I was mallard, but lay on my sofa listening, such is my commitment to this debate. I prefer not to speak from behind the screen. I don't think it's an ideal forum. It certainly doesn't compare with being in the Assembly. So it's been a long fortnight of listening in isolation. Before I continue, I really must, along with others, extend my appreciation and thanks to the Minister, his assistants, and particularly to the patience and the dedication of the officers. I know they have been inundated with requests from us, and they've always been answered quickly, in short notice, and very agreeably. It's been a tough job, and they've conducted it exceptionally well. I'm afraid I must mention population. The Constable of Grouville and others have absolutely nailed it and highlighted the tensions that we must overcome. In summary, if we freeze in with migration suddenly, the economy suffers and our ability to provide essential services, health, education, etc. And also our ability to staff those essential services, and also the services required for hospitality, agriculture, etc. could be impacted seriously. Conversely to that, if we continue as is, our environment and the quality of life suffers. This is the major tension that we are all confronting. Ma'am, many have complained, innumerable people have complained, and I've heard even some more today, but no one has come to me, either privately or publicly, with any viable short-term solutions. No silver bullet, ma'am, nothing from anyone. I think that is testament to how complicated this challenge is. And I must mention, and I appreciate the comments that have come from many people out there who really appreciate this and appreciate the efforts that have been put in to try and solve this very complex problem. As I said to the media, if we'd done what is in this policy 10 or 15 years ago, we'd be having a totally different conversation today. But we didn't. So we have no option but to start now with the fundamental building blocks and to remind members those building blocks are based around improved productivity, primarily through technology, and making informed decisions based on near real-time data. Anyhow, back to the island plan. I feel we've all picked up on the many inconsistencies which are inevitable when we have 102 amendments from independent members bringing, speaking and voting on their own personal bugbears and passions. I'm guilty. It's only natural and to be expected. The problem, ma'am, is the process. All processes must be geared to have an outcome. Not a predetermined outcome, of course, but a consistent, strategically considered outcome. And some members will have heard my analogy. To them, I apologize. This plan is like having a number of jigsaw puzzles, let's say 4. We've taken a handful of pieces from each puzzle, shuffled them together, and tried to make a complete puzzle. Imagine the outcome and what that puzzle would look like. I do not have the solution, but I want to work to find it, a way of making informed strategic decisions that equally and fairly meet the needs of everyone we serve. I will, of course, be supporting the plan. Thank you, Ma'am.
Deputy Pamplin.
Thank you, Mum. Time is an extraordinary thing. Only 2 weeks ago, I was fresh-faced with very little grey hairs. Now look at me. Time is also an extraordinary thing. 4 weeks ago, the invasion of Ukraine started. That's a month ago today, Mum. 4 years ago, some of us were starting and thinking about coming forward to represent the parts of the parishes they wanted to represent and stand in the election. I, of course, was one of those. And in doing so, in the parish district 1 of St Saviour, there was only one person I wanted to talk to first off, who had stood and served the parish district so well after many years. And that former deputy, of course, a good school friend of my dad, the former Environment Minister, Rob de Hamel. And knowing full well that the Island Plan would come under the 4-year tenure of this sitting assembly. And I sat with him and he said, I can only afford you 10 minutes, Deputy. 4 hours later, still sitting with him, I took away many, many things. And I walked away thinking I had a better understanding of the 4 years ahead of me. In some regards I was right, but these last 2 weeks have proven not so much. However, he was right. He was so ahead of his time on many times when it came to the aspects of the environment, and I thought many times during this debate about what he may have said. Of course, what I hadn't realised, after also visiting my district recently in St Saviour District 1, I'd probably taken on too many of those wise words he says, literally. I cycle into work for the last 2 weeks. I've started to grow my own vegetables with my daughter, and I seem to have grown a tribute beard in response as well. However, I have thought a lot about the environment impacts that he passionately stood for and that are very meaningful to my children and those of the future generations. And in turning to this island plan debate, it still, I think, leaves far more questions without answers for future generations. And I wish to hear from the Environment Minister in his summing up about what he wants to hand over from his experience and his knowledge and tenure and this experience the last 2 weeks for the future generations to come who will come into this chamber. Not just the next election, the next election, the next election to come. Because it is that generation, that this island that we are custodians of, and we have to do better jobs to make sure that when they do inherit this island, it is an island, of course, that we have enjoyed over the years growing up. And it is on that I want to hear, because the last 2 years especially have unrooted us all and given us a moment globally to reflect about how we go about our daily lives, how we take responsibility for the things that we all believe in and stand for in ways that none of us could possibly have imagined. In a crisis, you can't escape, you can't hide. Everything is exposed, the good and the bad things, and I've said that before. And what it also gives us the opportunity is we could do things differently. We have to. So I want to hear more again from the Environment Minister, because I know he feels very passionately about this chamber and the States Assembly, of what have we learned? How has this made us challenge our convictions of how we do this island plan? Because I believe there's been a tension throughout the whole process that naturally it wants to evolve even further. So how can we go about doing that in the future, that we deliver an island plan and a process that is appropriate to the times that we live in now, that we respect the past and hold on to the things we hold dearly, but understand that we must do things differently. So I look forward to hearing that from the Minister from his speech. And it's no surprise to members that I will mention this, of course, that my passion and my big driver for the last 4 years has been my commitment to improving the island's mental health services that we all deserve. And often when I speak to people about this, and they come for my advice, they want to talk to me or offload or share my experiences on a personal level. Generally speaking, somewhere in the mix, in terms of mental health, it's about the pressures that we all fear. We all want to be there for our family and loved ones and support them, but we cannot get away from the growing pressure of the cost of living and the house prices and rent. Something we haven't heard too much about is the renting islanders who are under continual pressure as much as everybody. And I still think we could do better. And I've said this before, Mum, to the Minister privately, that we've done this when we've just done an island census. We've just gone through a pandemic which has shifted this island. We don't have that data. And I know, Mum, and it is quite right, they are independent and should be allowed to work without the pressures of certainly this Assembly so much and the government saying you must provide this. However, it hasn't sat right with me throughout this whole process. That information is there and it's coming together, and we've just made decisions for the next 3 weeks. And when that data comes through in a few weeks' time, what if there's something in there? So in 3 years' time, we have to maybe throw things out. We can do better than that, surely. We did that in 2 weeks, where we were turning around legislation for public health, which I don't think we would ever achieved in normal times. That's all I wanted to say. I join in the tributes to others, and I think of others who I sit on the shoulders of, who sat in these chairs before me, and I wonder about the future and what their reflection will be in 20, 30, 40 years to come. Thank you, Mum.
Thank you, Deputy. Senator Farnham.
Thank you, ma'am. And I think it's been quite a remarkable debate in many ways. Well, whatever the imperfections of the plan turn out to be, we can at least say that it's received extensive debate and scrutiny since we began the process. It's also been somewhat remarkable because it's quite remarkable that we've all got back together in this Assembly and actually been stuck in close proximity for the last 2 weeks, I think, made up for all the absences we've had. But it really is, if I said I'd enjoyed being here for 2 weeks, that's probably close to the truth, but it really is the dynamic, the importance of being in the Assembly, I think, is shown in debates like this. And I'm not being critical of members that can't be here. That's not, it's just it's really important that we're here. It's good to be back in the coffee room and chatting and eating too many biscuits and doing some networking and discussing all sorts of important issues. And I think that just demonstrates the value and the importance of this assembly. It's been for me, ma'am, like I say, interesting. I think we've made some good decisions. I'm very disappointed, obviously, about the Marine Park, and I think I was quite optimistic about that. I think Senator Gorse made a speech, quite an important speech, actually, which swayed a lot of members, and we didn't get it over the line on this occasion, but I very much hope it's something we can continue to aspire to. So disappointed about that, very relieved that, for example, the Jigalan Quarry is not going to be extended because of just the huge impact that would have had on the landscape and homes in the area. I want to just pay my own tribute to the Environment Minister, Deputy Young, and let's face it, it's a bit of a roller coaster working with Deputy Young, and I can say that having worked closely with him, and it's in a complimentary way. I'm saying this throughout the pandemic, and fellow ministers and members will know what I'm talking about. And if he's not satisfied just with dealing with the island plan over the last couple of weeks, we are still getting emails from him at 10 o'clock at night, quite chunky ones, several paragraphs on all sorts of different issues not related to the island plan. I pay tribute to his extraordinary capacity for attaining the knowledge required to manage such a debate, and for the vigour with which he has delivered it. And of course the officers, there are a number of officers, but two in particular, who between them I think have written just about every word of the island plan, and they have such extensive knowledge, and it's been most helpful having them on hand to explain the pros and cons of a lot of the amendments. Deputy Ward mentioned one in particular amendment where we agreed that something had to be done unless it can't be done. Well, I don't really like the word can't. When people that I work with tend to say I can't do that, I tend to say back to them, you mean you won't do it? You could do it, or you could say I can do it, but what you're saying is I will not, and there's a difference between cannot and will not, and it's worth remembering, ma'am, that lots of things that can't be done have been done, and they've been done very well indeed. And I think if we take that approach to this plan, it will be a great success. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak on the island plan as amended? Conataba St Rallard.
Thank you, ma'am. I rise briefly not only to agree with previous speakers regarding the support from the GREF, and particularly when it comes to last minute. And I've been very guilty of submitting some last minute amendments and work to them, which they've turned around with rapid efficiency, which wouldn't happen, I'm sure, in other places. Ma'am, my focus on this island plan has been very much in my parish, as members will know, in St Brelade's Bay in particular. And I thank members to listening to my amendments. Some were successful, some not so. But the focus really was on ensuring that our visitor economy is retained. And the retention of hotels, in my view, is so terribly important to the island, not only for visitors, but the trickle-down economic effect that they have. So I thank members for their support, and I do hope that I've made a marker with regard to that particular element of the hospitality industry, which won't get overlooked in the future, which is terribly easy to do. So I thank members for their attention.
Thank you. Deputy Ash.
Thank you, Ma'am. Mine will be very, very brief. I really just want to, having done a few of these sort of speeches for various things, to thank Deputy Young for a phenomenal effort in bringing this. It's a marathon. I keep thinking of him standing there in a sort of Blackadder role saying, I have a wonderful plan here to bring you, and yourself or the bailiff saying, is it a cunning plan? Is it as cunning as a fox who's just been appointed Professor of Cunning at Oxford University? Well, I don't think it was a cunning plan in any way. It was a very upfront plan. He was very accepting of any criticism. He, both before and during the debate, and he was very open-minded. And I think that's fantastic. one of the great things for me that came out of the debate was a love of the island. I think nearly every speaker demonstrated a great love of the island. And I think too often these days, not just in the Assembly, in fact, away from the Assembly, in the press, we don't have that love coming through. We have almost a despair of the island. I think that's a shame. We saw it this week, didn't we, with the P&O works, which was a terrible situation that went on with P&O. And the first thing that some people jumped up and said, well, this is Jersey's fault because the contracts were in Jersey. And it turned out it wasn't Jersey's fault at all. Our contracts were, the chairman actually stood up and said that what he did was illegal and absolutely disgraceful. But the first thing people did was try to knock Jersey. And I really think we must move away from knocking Jersey because, as this debate has shown, it's a wonderful place and people are really willing to fight very hard to preserve it as the wonderful place it is. And on that note, I'll just leave with a quote from Sanjita Pandey, who said, "Never let the things you want make you forget the things you have." Thank you, Mum.
Thank you. Before we move to the next speaker, I know that, Deputy Young, you need to keep your energy resources high, but Standing Order 99.3b does say that no food or drink should be consumed within the Assembly. I'll just remind you of that. You were spotted. Deputy Morrell.
Thank you. And indeed, for the Minister, it has been a marathon. It has been a marathon. And yes, I would like to start by personally thanking the officers of the Environment Department and SPPP who have helped compile this Bridging Island Plan, marshal the evidence, and obviously who have been here throughout the last 2 weeks of debate. Their help is greatly appreciated, and I know others have said the same, but I just wanted to say that as well. The same for the staff of the GREF. I think it's been amazing work on all your parts. The running order that we are provided with helped this move smoothly for 2 weeks and really did help us a great deal. And of course, the Minister, the Marathon Minister, as he can now be called, he's sat here sneaking drinks and food over the last 2 weeks, but in doing so, he's kept himself here in the chamber hour after hour, and it's been a real effort on his part, and he's done amazingly. And he has taken some bumps and bruises on the way incredibly graciously. You know, I've been one of those bumping, bruising people, and he's done so incredibly graciously. He's lost, he's won, he's drawn from time to time, and he's done so with a smile on his face throughout. It's an incredibly difficult job, and I'd really like to thank him for having stood his ground and done it. Turning to the island plan, I just want to, I know there's lots that can be gone over that people have already said, but I said it during the debate, but I am concerned about the lack of employment land, provision for employment land in the island plan. I think as an Assembly, we're in danger of forgetting that without a high-performing economy, we cannot afford many services, we cannot afford many protections, we cannot afford many facilities. And so we do need to keep our eye on making it possible to enable and facilitate business in this island. Without it, we have very little. And so, I think Deputy Ash just now talked about, quite rightly, talked about Jersey's entrepreneurial spirit. Absolutely right. It's that spirit which has got us through centuries and centuries and centuries of being a small outpost of the British Isles in this tiny little island. And we're remote, we're a tiny island. Those are fantastic attributes in so many ways, but it does mean that we have to keep moving, we have to keep changing, we have to be flexible, and we have to keep trading with the rest of the world. I am concerned, and I'll maintain my concern, that this island plan does not actually make that easier. It does not enable those things, and that does concern me. And I look forward to an island plan in 3 years' time, which will hopefully correct that balance. I believe, and I agree with the Chief Minister, that the State has sent a message about greenfield sites. It has said, whilst maintaining a balance, I do believe we have a reasonable balance between providing new homes in the countryside, but we haven't gone to the level of targets that the Environment Minister had set. And I believe that in itself is a message saying, here are some greenfields, here is some housing, we know that's needed, but the state does not believe that the work has been done to adequately see how far we can exploit state-owned sites, we can exploit brownfield sites, we can exploit greenfield sites, we can exploit unused properties. That's, for me, the biggest weakness in this island plan, and I said it during the debates, and it's where I was perhaps most bruising towards the Minister, was in that sense that the evidence does not speak to me and many other states members that those areas have been adequately and sufficiently looked at. And it is a simple balance. I discussed it with Deputy Ward, who sits next to me in the chamber, a number of times. When you build on a greenfield site, that greenfield is lost forever. And so the idea that there are alternatives which have not been looked at properly is the sticking point. And it's the bit that we need to satisfy, or we need to have satisfied in this chamber, before we can really say, yes, you know what, we have to go to greenfield sites. That's the only place. I think every single state's member can think of a site in their heads that they know is an unused area of property in Jersey that is not being exploited properly or used efficiently. And as long as we all have those thoughts in our head, it becomes very difficult to deliver the kind of targets that the Environment Minister talked about. So I really hope that the next Environment and Planning Minister addresses that issue. Otherwise, they will find themselves, I have a funny feeling, in exactly the same position where targets are not being met because the Assembly does not feel that alternative sites have been looked at properly. I do apologise, I can't remember which states member mentioned it, but for me it's been a real issue, a thorn on my side as well. Land is one of the scarcest resources we have in Jersey, and it's therefore one that we need to use as efficiently as possible. The trouble is that we're not doing that, and I believe one of the problems we have here is there is nothing in this island plan or the last government plan which captures any of the value added that we have bestowed upon people. We have, as I said, I think in the previous debate, provided lottery tickets. It was the Constable of Grouville who brought this up, that's right, earlier in today's debate. We've handed out, effectively, lottery tickets to various property owners around the island, winning lottery tickets, guaranteed winning lottery tickets to various property owners in this island. That's fair enough, but we haven't in any way sought to properly capture some of that value for the public good as well. We have the Sustainable Communities Fund, or we have that sort of thing. It's not enough. And I really hope the Environment Minister and his team take that back, and the Treasury Minister takes that back as well, because we need to be capturing some of that value in these properties, in my opinion. Talking about community facilities, during the last week, I had a parishioner, a parishioner contact me, actually not a parishioner from St. Lawrence, a parishioner from one of the other parishes that I will seek to be representing after the elections. But an islander contacted me, pointing out a site that had been built some time ago where community facilities were promised as part of the planning application. And the community facilities, the site was then built, and at some point, the developer had obviously turned back around to the planning department and said, you know what, this site doesn't work with these community facilities, and the community facilities were quietly dropped. And that site was then just fully developed as apartments. There were no community facilities included. That's something which cannot happen. I think Constable Saint-Jean has said quite rightly, especially with regard to Field 1109, we need to make sure that community facilities accompany all of these sites. It's not good enough to just be building villages in the countryside where there isn't a focal point for the community. It's just not right. Whether that focal point is some sort of a restaurant or hospitality facility, whether it's an area of open ground which can be used by all sorts of people, whether it's shops and a mixture of different facilities, it doesn't matter. But what does matter is enabling these communities to have somewhere to gather together. That's at the heart of this wonderful island, is the sense of community that we have, the sense that we all know we're each other's neighbours. And so helping people meet and learn about each other is really important. So I really hope, Minister, that the Minister ensures that any of the planning whether it's in town, whether it's out of town, that we have allowed to happen through this island plan includes all those community facilities. And obviously Deputy Gardner's play area amendment yesterday was a really important element of that and should help that happen a bit more. I also can't help but echo the words of Deputy Guida that the natural environment is not really adequately represented in this island plan. It's there, it plays a part, but it's kind of in the wings rather than front and centre. And I think similarly to the green fields, or in fact, the difficulty we have had in zoning the number of green fields the Minister wanted is also an indication that the natural environment is actually a real priority for states members as a whole. I know it's more of a priority for some, less for others, but I think we all know that the natural environment is one of the things that makes this island wonderful. We've got the community, we've got the natural environment, we've got the enterprise spirit. Those things together really do make this a wonderful and unique island. And Deputy Guido, I believe, is absolutely right. We need to make sure that the next island plan captures the importance of the natural environment even more so. Ma'am, I'm delighted that the Gigaland quarry was not safeguarded. I think that's really important. The work can now be done to gather the evidence properly. I'm also delighted that all but one of my amendments in themselves were passed by the Assembly. That's a great help and was a little bit to help with the lack of concern for employment land in the original draft island plan. I'd like to congratulate the Assembly as well for what I think was in the main a well-humoured and well-mannered debate. I think that is really good, and I know there were moments of friction, but I think overall we've spent 2 weeks in this Assembly getting on with each other pretty well. Now, some may say that's because there are some gaps in the seating, so perhaps you've got a bit more air to breathe, but I would say that we do need states members back in this Assembly. Not being here harms the Assembly, and I know there are some who have very valid reasons, but I'm less sure of others' reasons. I don't want the Assembly to be harmed. It's the heart of the democracy in this island. And to every single member, and obviously we've all seen each other for the past 2 weeks. We know the people who have been here for 2 weeks. And I'm really pleased that I'm sure you all also share that sense of the importance of being here in person, talking to each other, building relationships, talking about the policies, talking about the issues together face to face. Nothing really replaces that. And whilst 49 of us are not in this Assembly, I do believe the Assembly is being harmed and damaged by that. So I really hope that when we come to an ordinary sitting of the Assembly next week, we will see many more states members here. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Southern.
Thank you, Ma'am. And I will be brief. Members will be pleased to note. Increasingly, I find I'm of the school of philosophy that says less is more. So here's a little less. When we talk about did we have enough information, we've concentrated on population issues, etc. What we were missing, and which is vital, and will not arrive until after we finish this debate, is the income distribution survey, which has been overdue for far too long. So with the result that we have no idea what's the state of our economy. So we're making decisions in the Island Plan with no idea about the economic condition, financial and fiscal condition of the island's economy. And that cannot help but be a mistake. And that should not ever happen again. That's compulsory part of where we are. What's the economy doing? Because we need to make decisions exactly about that. But I rose to my feet just to make sure, in case there are any chance of mistake, that my position on the Island Plan is crystal clear. In the past, I may, out of principle, even where we've changed the Island Plan or the economic plan or whatever plan it is, and I've voted against it still for the reason that I don't want anybody from on those benches saying, this is your plan. No, it's not. I didn't vote for it. This time, however, as part of my commitment to being in a party, I shall refrain from using the contre-finger, replace it with the paw. Because whilst this may not be a perfect plan, the contre-finger or the paw finger. Is that clear? Sadly, it may be clear. Sorry, distracted there. But it seems to me that where I'm going politically is more and more towards a pale imitation, I must admit, a pale imitation of my predecessor in number 2 district, now central St Helier, Norman Le Brocq, who started off life as a red in tooth and claw and ended up as a green. And what I think when I look at this plan, I'm struck by, where's the green policy? Where's the initiatives we could have taken today to make sure that we got some fundamentals rolling, or some fundamentals on which to base future policy? And where's the policy? For example, in minor things, on e-charging points for electric cars, for example. They may or may not be part of the solution, but where's the policy, and have we worked on it this time around in order to make sure we've got the right policy so that we can adaptably make that transition? Where, for example, is our policy on photovoltaic arrays? Again, that may be a major part of the way in which we travel towards zero carbon. But have we prepared for it this time around? No. So what it suggests to me is that is missing, and what is also missing is the DIY that I usually quote when anybody says, why haven't we done this? And I'm saying it now. Where's the DIY? If in doubt, don't rely on anybody else in this chamber to move in the right direction and create the right policy. Do it yourself. So perhaps the target I might be looking for, and I will be looking for, is pressing on green issues so that this time, in 3 years hence, we will actually develop some green policies that are workable, flexible, and that way will see us through the next transition in our economy. Very much in imitation of Norman Le Brocq. Right, let's go on. The missing element today in this policy is green issues and our transition towards zero carbon. It may not be too late to make sure that that is a fundamental base that we've got established this time in 3 years' time. And I'll be looking for that, and where possible, pressing and pushing to make sure that we get as green a possible base to our economy in the future. That's my task for the next 3 years, should I be returned.
Constable of St Mary.
Thank you, Ma'am. May I give notice that I intend to propose that the debate is closed in the next 30 minutes, as per Standing Order 84. Thank you, Ma'am.
Thank you, Conatable. Conatable of St Martin.
I would echo much of what Deputy Luce has said, who spoke so well on behalf of the parish of St Martin. We in St Martin have acquitted ourselves well, and thanks to the Bridging Island Plan, we will be providing affordable homes and homes for over 55s in our very green and very pleasant parish. My take out from this 2 weeks, and my main wish, is that before we debate any future island plans, we need to sit down and ensure that the process used to determine, develop and deliberate the plan is tightened up and clearly outlines that private applications amendments more suitable to planning applications through the proper channels are not included. No more muddying the waters with this type of amendment. The island plan should be for the public good and divorced from private interests. I reiterate sincere thanks to the GREF, to the planning officers for their knowledge and tenacity, and applaud the Minister for his enthusiasm. And I'm not quite sure how long he has spoken for in this 2 weeks, but it must now run into hours. I would like to thank my fellow members. This has been a long and tough 2 weeks. Overall, this has been well humoured, very well researched and well debated. Thank you.
Conataba St Lawrence.
Thank you, sir, Madam. I'm hastily scribbling some notes to speak very briefly. Members will be pleased to know in this debate. We've heard about balance, and that is something that I have mentioned a number of times when I've spoken over the past 2 weeks. And for me, the balance has been about protecting our green land, our good agricultural land. And I remember the Minister saying, I think yesterday, that he is taking away a clear message from the debates that we have had, that this Assembly wants to protect good agricultural land. And of course, that is the difficulty that we have all been faced with. It's the provision of affordable homes versus the protection of our good agricultural land and our countryside. And notwithstanding, of course, that the Environment Minister has said he will not be standing for election again in June, it may be the case that our next Environment Minister is a member of this Assembly and will also be taking away the same message from 2 weeks of debate that our current Minister will be taking away. So we all know the feelings of this Assembly. We know that the protection of our valuable countryside and our good agricultural land is absolutely paramount. I just want to touch on a couple of other things, of course, that we've debated over the past couple of weeks. I'm still of the view that the states-owned land, states-owned sites, has not been adequately explored for the provision of affordable homes. And, you know, we agreed that 15% was acceptable. 15% was too low for me. I mentioned to Senator Mesick that his 100% was too much. To me, it wasn't viable. And I regret that I didn't bring something to propose maybe 50%, which would have been, I think, far more acceptable than the 15. But we are where we are. And we've heard Le Collett mentioned a few times, and Deputy Pamplin, when speaking about the former, I believe, Planning and Environment Minister, Deputy Duhamel, I remember Deputy Duhamel mentioning on numerous times in this chamber that what we should be doing was decanting from premises that need not be used for small businesses, potentially. And my understanding was that the idea would be that they would move to either industrial sites, but particularly to Le Collett, because I think there is far too much open space at Le Collett that isn't being utilised. What is it there for? Every time I drive down to take recycling, it seems to me that there's another bit of big open space down there, and I wonder what on earth it's going to be used for. My view is that we should be utilising it to move small businesses there, notwithstanding the Buntsfield and the fuel farm I suppose, limitations on it. But we should be using it to decant small businesses from premises or that could be utilised for homes, because not everybody needs a brand new, newly built, affordable home. We don't have to build brand new affordable homes if we are able to utilise buildings that are already in existence to provide family homes. So that's what we should be doing, in my opinion. We know that Deputy Guida is absolutely passionate about the environment, and his views that the natural environment has not been adequately represented within this debate, I cannot disagree with. And it's absolutely ironic to me, though, that the minister presenting this debate is the Environment Minister. The environment. So what is he there for? What do we have an Environment Minister for? Surely it's their duty is to protect the environment. That's what I'm assuming, and to me it's ironic that the minister has, in this plan, brought forward a number of, or supported the development of a number of good agricultural fields. That, to me, doesn't balance. If he is the Environment Minister, his duty, I feel, should be to absolutely fight for our environment. And environment, in this case, I'm thinking to mean the natural environment of this island of Jersey. And I asked the minister, when he sums up, to explain to me why the word planning was removed from his title. Because I'm pretty sure it used to be the Planning and Environment Minister. So does that mean that planning is less important than the environment? I just don't know. But it seems to me there should be a tension between the two, as we have observed during the debates of the past 2 weeks. There has been a tension between the environment and planning matters. And I think that's as it should be. But I'm a little concerned that we have a minister, obviously not referring directly to Deputy Young personally, but the role itself is environment, with planning tacked on somewhere. And it's clear that this debate really has been about planning issues more than, I would say, the benefit to the environment that we could and should be delivering. And I think that point was really picked up by Deputy Southern when he mentioned a moment ago, where are the green policies in this? Where are the environmental policies? And he said if he's here in 3 or 4 years' time, that's what he'll be looking for. But actually, we shouldn't be waiting for 3 or 4 years to be looking at good, strong environmental policies. I'm not even sure that we've mentioned much about our carbon neutral policy within this debate. Surely that should have come into it as the minister is the Environment Minister. So those are my views on this debate. What I would say is that the minister, to me, is the most passionate minister when it comes to him speaking about his remit, be that environment or planning. He absolutely speaks from his heart when he addresses what is his job, and he's described it to us. He has been doing his job for the past 2 weeks. He's the most passionate, and I think I'd like to thank him for that, because it actually, I think it engenders from us all a greater interest when we hear somebody speaking firmly, with passion, with absolute conviction about what they have to say. And I'm hoping that his passion and actually this debate will have prompted those members who are here now and who may be returned after the next election to consider standing for the planning committee, because it's absolutely, I must, members know I'm a member of that committee since 2018. I'd always shied away from it because I thought I'm not really that good at reading plans and everything. But it's not about knowing the detail of the plans and the window frames. That's down to the officers, building regs and everything else. It's about common sense and what we should be doing, what applications we should be saying, yes, that's absolutely acceptable, and about those that we should be saying, no way can this be acceptable to me as an individual representing the people of this island. And we've all driven around, and I know somebody mentioned this over the past 2 weeks, can't remember who it was, we've all driven around the island and thought, seen a horrific building or something in the wrong place and thought, how on earth did that get permission to go there? Who on earth decided that something as ugly as that should be smack bang in the middle of our countryside? So I would urge members to consider standing for the planning committee next time around, for those, and even new members, of course, who may be elected, because it's absolutely a vital thing that we don't make the mistakes that we have made in the past. And of course, the debate over the past 2 weeks is tightening policies up, it's changing policies so that we can hopefully deliver better for the island. But I would ask the Minister in his summing up, ma'am, to, and I know he's going to make a great speech. I'd like to, of course, echo the words of other members to thank him for his enthusiasm, and also to thank the officers who have been able to be in the building. And I would also like to thank, presumably, the bailiff who made the decision to allow the officers to come in, because that's been absolutely vital, as we have heard. So I thank that very wise decision. I appreciate that very wise decision. So I would like the Minister to explain to me, and of course to everyone else listening, why the term planning was dropped from the Planning and Environment Minister's role, and to talk about the tension between the environmental policies and the planning policies. And I would like him to tell me what takes precedence now in the decision making within his department. Is it environment, because it's the environment department, or is it planning? What takes precedence and when? Thank everyone else who's spoken. It's been a good 2 weeks, although, as Deputy Morrell said a couple of times, it's been a little uncomfortable to listen to what has been said, because there has been a tension between environment and planning. But overall, I think it's really brought members actually together again, ma'am, particularly as there are more of us in the chamber again. Thank you.
Thank you, Conatap. Senator Mezek.
Thank you, ma'am. Of course, I would want to endorse every single word that's been said in commendation of those officers who've worked incredibly hard to get us to where we are in their politically neutral roles, putting this document together and providing us with advice, both, of course, in your team and that in the Environment Department as well, and much has been said about that. And the reason I want to highlight that point at the start is because what I'm about to follow with is not their fault. And the main point I wanted to make is that this Bridging Island plan is a Bridging Island plan of missed opportunities, which sells the island short and does not provide an adequate enough framework for development over these next few years to meet the needs of the public of this island. And yes, there have been some very good amendments that have been accepted, which have made the plan slightly more acceptable. One of those amendments was my own. A few others from party colleagues and independent members as well have contributed valuably too. But I maintain that I have great concerns over where the island will be in a few years' time if this plan is followed to its letter, or more likely that we fall short on what the plan attempts to deliver for us. I am disappointed that several of the safeguards that were proposed for the St Brellard's Bay area were not approved by this Assembly, and I am deeply worried that that special part of our island and its character and offer to tourists and locals will be lost because of a lack of bravery from those in government to take interventions that are necessary to do that. And I think that that is replicated across other parts of the island affected by this plan too. I share the views of Deputy Southern, who spoke about the lack of green initiatives and thinking about the future with our carbon neutral ambitions which are absolutely vital. And most importantly for me, for where I'm coming from politically, is I really think that those who, before this plan, had little hope that Jersey's affordable housing crisis would be alleviated will have even less hope now because of the opportunities that have been missed. And what this plan and what this government has actively proposed to fall short on what the island needs. I maintain, and I will keep maintaining, that it is a disgrace that this plan allows for unaffordable homes to be built on publicly owned land. That was a mistake, and it should not have been included in this plan in the first place. And I hope those who are politically responsible for that will pay the political price for it. And I think they'll have a shock, those of whom who wish to run for re-election, on the doorsteps telling people we want to use land which you own to turn into, in some cases, luxury investment apartments for the super wealthy. Good luck making that case to them. The fact that there is to be a big windfall of unaffordable homes outside of town and no affordable homes provided except on those sites which have been rezoned, some of which have been good agricultural land, and how sad it is that the politicians who put this plan together didn't seek to strike a much better balance in that, and then we have subsequently have gone through this process with backbenchers amendments, which the one lesson I hope we've learned at the end of this 2 weeks is that there are substantial improvements to this process that can be made so that we get something at the end of it which is more coherent. So rather than dedicating some more time to giving the government the kicking they deserve for not providing a plan which deals more thoroughly with these issues, I will say that the alternative to this is to not pass this and have the previous island plans policies continue, and that is worse. So we obviously can't tolerate that, which means that this plan unfortunately does have to be accepted. But I will say and put on record now that in the next few years we will have a lot of catching up to do to try to mitigate what this plan puts in place in its failure to provide the supply of affordable housing that we need, and the failure of this Assembly previously to introduce the types of regulatory protections for housing that aren't connected to the supply issues that have had a big impact in exacerbating the housing crisis. So when we come to the next parts of the Bridging Island plan, there will have been a lot of lost ground, but I can say at least that I have optimism that the composition of the next States Assembly will be better equipped to deal with that. And if I have any attempts to have a say in that, I will make sure that it does much better next time round.
Thank you, Senator. Deputy Tadia.
Thank you, ma'am. That rhymes with ham. Ma'am, I didn't know how long I'd have to speak, or indeed that I'd be straight after Senator Mezek, my party leader. I do hope, though, that now that we have 15 minutes speeches, and I won't speak for that long, I would have hoped that it would not be necessary to use the guillotine, as we call it colloquially, to cut off the debate, because I think it's important to hear what members have to say after 10 days of debate. I can count. I learned how to use my fingers like Deputy Southern today. And it's good to see that Deputy Southern goes over and beyond. So we are a trilingual assembly, but he's been learning British Sign Language, or indeed it could have been French Sign Language. I'm not sure, because I think it was understood in whatever language we might wish to speak. For some, this is a bridging island plan, which is a bridging island plan too far. So we do see some emails from members of the public who are urging us to vote against this. I'll come back to that towards the end. And of course, I endorse everything that's just been said by my party colleague, thanking the independent staff who have been doing lots of admin, no doubt, for us as well as for the Minister and the Assistant Ministers in supporting this. I do want to look at, let's say, 3 areas briefly. The first one, it was an interesting, just very quickly, what the Constable of St Lawrence said about is he the Minister for the Planning or Environment? And she did qualify what she meant by the environment. And of course, this has long been a conversation and a tension which I'm sure he's capable of addressing at the end. It did also dawn on me that, that there is a built environment, of course, and I know the Constable knows that because she qualified her interest to talk to the natural environment. But there is that balance, of course, because of people's immediate environment, of course, is their home, the home in which they live. And if they're living in an unhealthy environment for whatever reason, because it might be psychologically they don't have security of tenure, or that they have got inadequate housing because it might be cold and damp, it's difficult to heat, etc., or there are just sound issues in those areas, then that is their immediate environment, rather than any considerations they might have about a luxury of being able to go for long walks in a country park. That doesn't mean, of course, the latter isn't important. It just means that I'm sure whoever the future planning minister is and environment minister, he or she will need to juggle those 2 tensions. And of course, there is a case, perhaps, for having a separate environment minister. But what we've got to make sure, I guess, is that whatever happens, we have joined up policy, because there's no point in just having a minister. We've seen it in the past where ministers can become isolated. You have responsibility for this. It's a glossy new title, but in fact, if the rest of government are not doing and supporting that minister, it becomes either worthless or, in fact, counterproductive. I wanted to look at transport quickly because we didn't get a chance to have the debate on it yesterday with the Constable of St Helier. And I think this is key because there's a risk, of course, that we still try and build the island's infrastructure around the private motor vehicle. At the same time, I wanted to make the point that there's going to need to be transitional arrangements, because it's not simply a case of cars and parking bad, bicycles, buses and walking good. Because actually there's going to be a period where we need to accept that if you want people to stop using their cars, then you're going to need to have more car parking spaces. Because if people are not using their cars, they need to park it somewhere. And people are not going to give up their cars as long as there's no alternative, because apart from cost, the other major implication and consideration for them is convenience. And so I think there is going to be that period. And for example, I've been needing to make my own planning for journeys. I normally have a scooter, which is really great for nipping around the island, which is currently, as the Americans would say, in the shop or at the garage. And so I've been having to use all sorts of transport, which includes getting lifts from parish constables to take me home, or using the bus, or getting the EV, which I found really useful when it works properly, is that you can just book these cars when you want to, and they work out very cost effective, and you can effectively have them for an hour and a quarter, and you can get to where you want, say, at lunchtime and get back for just £10. And it's remarkable if we think about how the price of petrol is going up or diesel. And I think we are going to see changes that dictate the planning rules, and we're going to look towards more communality of not simply having your own car, but just having access to a car or having access to a bus that runs somewhere near your house, but at the times that you want them. And having maybe more taxis, but fewer private cars, which are cheaper and that are electric, so that we're not getting the pollution that Deputy Ward talked about in key areas of the island. So I'll just leave those points there. There isn't an easy solution to that, but I think we've just got to be mindful and not build infrastructure that becomes outdated very quickly as things move on. I also want to focus on St Brelard, sir, but not in an indulgent way, because I think the lessons we can learn about what is or has been safeguarded or what hasn't been safeguarded at Llanelli and perhaps in the Bay are examples that we can all relate to in the different villages around the island, be that in St Peter, in St John, at Moffat, which again crosses different villages, and no doubt other ones like Gorey. There are probably others that I should mention, but those are the ones that immediately spring to mind as the slightly bigger conurbations, which, depending on how it goes, of course, they could all end up like Llanelli and red houses. I hope that what they do is that they capture the great community spirit that exists in Llanelli and red houses, but that it's better planned from a planning point of view from the beginning. And again, we need to get this balance right about what is the right intervention of government, whether it's central government or localised government, at dictating what we want to see there, while still allowing for the economy and the natural culture of those areas to grow up. They need to be viable places, sir. So that's why I'm really pleased and heartened that there has been a commitment by the Minister and the Assembly for some kind of master plan for that area. It is absolutely vital that we have proper conversations with the people who live and use those areas, but also the people who own it, and that's where the complications arise, and the support of the parish, which says, look, what could we do here if we had a blank canvas, if we had some blue sky thinking? And we've got a variety of different funding options, including from this, hopefully, this new development fund, whatever it is, which can now be used across the island. I would like to see some great sustainable living, some parks there, some cafes, more European, maybe less central UK towns. And I'm sure there are some great examples in the UK as well. But I certainly know what vision I would want to see broadly for that area and other villages and towns throughout our island. So I think I'm going to limit this to, I'm going to skip the housing issue, sir, simply just to say that I'll limit it to these points. Of course, the island plan has been focusing on affordable housing and I think largely home ownership. And we've been talking, there's often been, I think, a false equation of affordable housing with first-time buyers, and the two are not the same at all. I mean, if a first-time buyer home doesn't mean it will be affordable, and it also doesn't mean that those homes will necessarily stay affordable or in the scheme in perpetuity. So I'll be watching closely to make sure that whatever schemes there are in the island are properly ring-fenced, and that when people sell, they should be selling back to the scheme, and that we shouldn't have just an initial subsidy which says, okay, we'll help you buy a house and we'll retain 25 or 33%, whatever it is, of your property, but after that you can then sell it on the open market, because that's the problem, that's the error we made in the first place with the state's loan. Really good idea to have the state's loan scheme, help people buy their own houses, but then you're helping unaffordable houses perpetually remain in the market, sir. So the other point is that if we want more people to own their own homes, you get fewer renters, you're going to need fewer rental properties, and then those rental properties can also be freed up for families to buy, which are affordable, sir. But lastly, sir, I think it's partly, I don't know if it's incumbent on me, but I feel that I want to congratulate the Minister, who is a fellow St Brelard deputy, and it just is a matter of fact that I'm the longest serving, continuously serving member of the parish of St Brelard. It's bizarre to say that, And I know the constable, the current constable, has of course been in the Assembly before me. I always like to say that it's been a pleasure working with Deputy Young. Again, there have been times when we've needed to, or I've needed to, have strong words with him publicly about where we've had disagreements. I know it's also been difficult, especially when you're the sole representative for a district within a bigger parish, to balance your ministerial duties with perhaps your constituency duties, especially when there are things that you can't deal with because it's not good practice to do so. And it's not always easy to then pass your work on to somebody else if you're the sole representative of that district, sir. And I know the constable maybe might sympathise with this point, but if there are people out there who complain that Deputy Young has been too busy, it surely has got to be a label of pride that he's been taking his ministerial responsibilities in this Assembly so seriously, in what I hope he won't mind me saying has been a difficult coalition for him, and that the very tension that I think the Constable of St Lawrence mentioned about the difficulties between planning and environment perhaps summarise very clearly the difficulties that the Minister has had, which he's vocalised himself about, and wanting to be greener, wanting to be more environmental, yet at the same time trying to keep this Assembly and the wider community happy in delivering not just the natural environment, but the built environment, so that people can live somewhere with security of tenure, somewhere that they can call a home for all of their life, so that they never need to move out of necessarily unless they want to, in communities which are organic, sustainable, and which people want to live in, sir. So with that in mind, sir, I'm happy to support, with the usual caveats, this Bridging Island plan. So much good work has got into it, and we need to get now to a point where we've got a government that can deliver in a joined-up way, looking at all of the issues that face the island and tackling them in a coherent manner, sir. But certainly for the part of this Minister and his officers and staff, I think they've done probably the best that they could under the given circumstances.
Thank you. Constable of St Mary, 30 minutes have indeed passed since you raised the intention. Are you still wishing to make that proposal?
Yes, ma'am, I would like to continue with that standing order. 84.
84.3 says the presiding officer shall not allow the proposal if it appears to him or her that it's an abuse of the procedure of the states or an infringement of the rights of minority. By convention, it's been normal that at least 10 members of the Assembly have spoken. We've had 19. I would say that it's, by convention, that it would be acceptable for you to make that proposal. And we should immediately go to the vote without debate.
Yes, ma'am, I would like to make that proposal.
Do you wish to speak on the proposal?
Yes, please.
I don't know. I don't think there is a ability for you to make a speech as such. I think we just immediately put the proposal to the vote.
I'd just like to call for the
debate.
appel on that vote, please.
Mark, could I ask how many people you've got listed to speak?
Just Deputy Lewis at the moment. I don't know if any other members wish to indicate a willingness to speak.
Ma'am, I think the proposal may need to be seconded. I don't know.
Very good point there, Deputy Morale. Is the proposal seconded?
Seconded.
Then we go to the vote. Those members in the precincts, if they'd like to return to the chamber. Those joining us on the link.
Sorry, ma'am, a technical question. We're voting on the
whether you wish
guillotine censure.
to close the debate and move to then Deputy Young would make his closing speech and we would go to the vote on the island plan.
Thank
it
you,
would just mean that no other members would be able to speak in the debate on the island plan as amended. So that's the vote before us. In a moment, the greffier will open the voting. I'll ask him to do so now. All members have had an opportunity to cast their votes. I'll ask the greffier to close the voting. Can announce the proposition has been lost. There were 15 votes in favour, 25 against and 1 abstention.
Can we have the 15 and the 1, please?
Greffier.
Those members voting for: Senator Gorst, the Conotab of Grouville and St Mary, Deputy Pinnell, Deputy Guida, Deputy Ayer, Deputy Higgins, the Conotab of St Saviour, Deputy Ash, Senator Valois, Deputy Labby, the Deputy of St Peter, Deputy Wickenden, Deputy Truscott, and the Deputy of Trinity, and Deputy Young abstained.
Very well. We continue with the debate. Deputy Lewis is next on my list.
Thank you, Ma'am. So, many members, Ma'am, have referred to states-owned land, and I just have to reiterate that even though property holdings is part of my remit, I have very, very little land as such, apart from seawalls and a lot of tarmac, very other little land. The last batch was handed to Andium, which is the Limes. The Constable of St Lawrence mentioned La Collette and the Bunsfield issue. Sadly, the Bunsfield issue is very much still a live topic. I'm obliged by law to build a periodic test inspection centre. That's not something I want to do. I'm obliged by law to do that as part of the Vienna Convention. I've had talks with the Minister of Environment, but sadly, because of the Bunsfield incidents, and I'll just quickly run over that for members of the public maybe listening in. Bunsfield was, I believe, an oil refinery in Hertfordshire, and in 2005 there was an enormous explosion, and it took the fire brigade in that particular area, fire service, a long time to put it out, and there was indeed considerable damage. And it was decided thereafter, if you have an oil refinery or a fuel storage area, to have what is in effect a bullseye area where within that zone nothing should be built or there should be no further expansion. That has been downgraded slightly from when it came in 2005, but there is still a presumption of no development at La Collette for the time being. That's the area where I wanted to build the periodic test inspection centre, and I was told not just no, it was an emphatic no on the grounds of health and safety. It does seem a little bizarre because we do have the recycling centre there, obviously the energy from waste plant is there, and hundreds of people on a daily basis go down to recycle their rubbish. But there is a presumption of no further development at La Collette for the time being. Who knows, in the future, maybe the gas centre there will be moved somewhere else. Likewise, the fuel farm may be relocated in the future. Who knows? But at the moment, it's no development, as I dearly wanted the head of DVS to have oversight, in both senses of the word, of the new periodic test inspection centre. It would be approximately, I believe, 5 or 6 lanes, and the testing will not be as onerous as an MOT inspection in the UK, because obviously we don't do the mileage. We don't have motorways. We don't do the mileage. So cars would only be inspected every 3 years. And anyway, that particular area was curtailed. And we've requested various other sites around the island, and all to no avail at the moment. I say I'm in constant dialogue with our colleague, the Minister of Environment and Planning, but people think that if you're a minister, you can do what you like. No, we have parameters we have to work in, and my job basically is having one of my legs tied to the Environment Minister's legs and told to go on a cross-country run. It's amazingly difficult job trying to fit in with all the parameters that we have. I also get stopped in the street on a regular basis and asked, why am I allowing La Folly Inn to deteriorate? Shouldn't I be doing it up? I'd say ideally love to, but it's not mine. It's not part of my remit. That's Ports of Jersey. So I would love to see a restaurant or something there with apartments above, and there's lots of development potential there. I don't know what Ports of Jersey have got in mind for it, but sadly it's not part of my remit, or it would be up and running as we speak. But I say I will speak very briefly, because I want to give as many members as possible the chance to speak before we presumably break for lunch in about 20-25 minutes. But there we are. It's a difficult job, but we do what we can. And I know the Environment Minister has a terribly difficult job. You're putting it politely, you're condemned if you do and condemned if you don't. And I will leave it there for now, ma'am. Thank you.
Ma'am, point of clarification, please.
Point of clarification, are you willing to give way, Deputy Lewis? Deputy Moran.
Thank you, Minister. It was just, could the Minister clarify whether it is actually an obligation by law that he builds a periodic testing centre? My understanding is that it's an obligation under the Vienna Convention. The Vienna Convention has been extended to Jersey, but it is not Jersey law.
Quite correct, sir. I'm obliged to build it, and it's the same thing. I am obliged to build this test centre as part of the Vienna Convention. Many people have said that why should we have our cars tested if we don't take them off island? But anybody coming to the island, tourist-wise, must be satisfied that we comply with the convention. So we are so doing, ma'am.
Does any other member wish to speak? Deputy Higgins has a point of clarification. Is that for the last speaker as well, Deputy Higgins?
Yes, it's for the Minister. Thank you.
Deputy Lewis, sorry. Is it a point of clarification?
Yes, Deputy Lewis, yeah.
Are you willing to give way, Deputy Lewis, for further point of clarification? Deputy Higgins.
The Minister said that we have to build the MOT testing centre. Is it not the case that if an alternative policy of allowing garages to offer MOTs, the Minister would not have to build a testing centre? Thank you.
Yes, but just to elucidate slightly, the industry was consulted widely. I believe every garage was consulted. The UK have been doing MOT testing since, I believe, 1960, but garages over here would have to run from a standing start. They would need a considerable, even the smallest garage would need considerable investment to bring all their equipment right up to date with the latest technology, and most garages couldn't afford it. So there would be, a lot of garages would be disadvantaged because of this. The larger garages would dominate the business from smaller garages. So it was decided and requested by industry that a standalone centre be built. Thank you, ma'am.
Does any other member wish to speak? No other member wishes to speak. Then I call upon the Minister to respond.
Thank you, ma'am. I think, looking at the clock, I think I'm going to have to start with an apology. I think this has been a very, very important debate, and thinking, how should I try and close this debate? I wanted to sum up some of the big messages that I've taken from the debate. debate these last 2 weeks, because I think they're really important that members carry them forward. Those members that are continuing in office or seeking election, carry those messages forward. And also, I think, and I've taken notes of the 20 members who have spoken. I think what I'd like to do and will be to go through my initial thoughts and then go through, if members would allow me to go through and pick up any key points in members' speeches this morning, which either need emphasis or have not been covered. And I'm sorry, I just don't think I can do that in 15 minutes. So I'm in your hands. I think, you know, this has been a really important debate. And I'll be frank, I'm going to say this before I pause and see what members want me to do. I think this has been, it's an outstanding debate. It's covered so many broad areas that set whole markers for the future. And I think it's going to set many issues in the elections. And I think it's so many, and it needs to be given proper justice and not sort of pushed away because we want to get off lunch and close. I'm in members' hands. I don't know what procedurally I can do.
Do you wish to propose the adjournment?
Yes, I'm going to propose the adjournment, ma'am.
Is the proposition seconded? Perhaps members could indicate with a standing vote whether they would be willing to adjourn for if members wish to show if they agree with that proposal. And against? Then the adjournment has been carried and we'll return at 2:15.